You're looking at territory that's been fought over for 3.5 years with, a lot of Russians have died, a lot of Ukrainians have died. So we're looking at that, but we're actually looking to get some back and some swapping. It's complicated. It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both. And but we'll be talking about that either later or tomorrow or whatever. Yeah, please. Say it. You're looking at.
That is Donald Trump explaining, I guess, on some level of what he is planning to do, meaning what he wants to accomplish in regards to the talks that are supposed to take place on Friday in Alaska. And there's been conflicting information on this. In one sense, you get them saying that Putin was very clear about what he wants. He hasn't deviated from the territories, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Donetsk, Lugansk, and of course, Crimea. These are territories. If Ukraine leaves, you weaken the deal. In other cases, there's contradictory information where the Europeans were calling and trying to say, hey, we need clarification. It's fascinating to me that the conversation about what's going to take place in regards to the security architecture of Europe has nothing to do with Europeans being involved. If that is not a devolution of position and status in the world, I don't know what is. You're effectively calling diplomats to try to figure out what the United States is trying to do. That is pretty amazing. But that seems to be the situation in which we find ourselves. Conflicting data, conflicting information on what exactly they are talking about. I'm unclear if Putin gave any notion that he's going to swap any territory, because at the end of the day, Trump has no cards in this. Now, any conversation that takes place in regards to ending the war, as Russia has said for the last 3 years, has to take into account the causes of that war. And in the context of causes of that war, no expansion of NATO. If Ukrainians move their troops out, if you stop giving them weapons, if you stop giving them arms, if you stop giving them intelligence, and I strongly suspect there's a provision in there that Zelensky needs to go, or at the very least there needs to be elections, then we can have a talk and we can have a ceasefire. Now, there may be leeway along where those lines are. True. Meaning if Russia's going to give anything, it may get dodgy about where it clarifies Zaporozhye, Kherson, Donetsk, Lugansk, where they are. But who knows? I have no idea. They're being somewhat tight-lipped. The negotiations are supposed to take place Friday, and we will see how this is meted out. What Trump wants and what, let's say, the media has been talking about are effectively swapping territory. This is JD Vance. JD Vance was asked about this. He comes out and says,
I think the president, and I certainly think that America, we're done with the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money.
What the hell? Why are you like that? All right, let's try this again. Come on.
We think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. But if the Europeans want to step up and actually buy the weapons from American producers, we're okay with that, but we're not going to fund it ourselves anymore.
What about?
So if Europeans want to step up and they want to put their money into it, God bless them, they can buy American weapons, and they can do that. Interestingly enough, this idea of sending Europeans to the meat grinder, to the Russian wood chipper, that is also over with. Apparently, the coalition of the willing is no longer willing to put themselves in Ukraine where they will get chewed up alive. That is where we are in regards to this notion of negotiations, in regards to talks. Donald Trump and Putin are going to meet in Alaska. A few points before I get to my guess. I understand the confidence that Putin has in this. where he is willing to come out. And by the way, before we even get to that, the response from Zelensky and the European Union has been, guess for yourself. You have 2 seconds to guess before I show it.
Окупації над іншою
Rejection.
стороною тривають майже цілодобово на різних рівнях, і ми не робимо все публічно. Тактику Путіна всі добре бачать. Він боїться санкцій і робить все, щоб зіскочити з них. Він хоче обміняти паузу у війні, вбивствах, на легалізацію окупації.
Zelensky is delusional. He is arguing in this that Putin is doing this because the sanctions are biting so bad and he wants to get rid of the sanctions and avoid them. And that basically he is not swapping any land. He's not giving up any territory. Period. Full stop. For one, and I've heard this put out by even some Russian analysts, Victor, what is his name, Brodkin, the guy who I actually like. This is not Putin offering anything. This is the Trump administration reaching out to the Russians to offer, because they understand what is taking place on the battlefield, and they understand that, A, they have no weapons to give them. They have no more excess in regards to Patriot missiles. And the battlefield is getting to the point where there is an utter and entire complete collapse that is taking place, especially in the context of the Donbass area. They are doing this because they are deeply concerned about what they're seeing on the battlefield. And as opposed to having a collapse that is a complete and outright humiliation, they want to have some level of control of the narrative that they got something out of it and some deal was taking place where they can effectively save face. This has nothing to do with the Russians reaching out to anybody. This has everything to do with Americans reaching out to the Russians. Zelensky is delusional, just like the European leaders that are backing him, completely and utter delusional. They put out a statement effectively saying, hey, we're not on board for this, and Zelensky should be a part of any negotiations, and we need to freeze the line of conflict first. These are the same European leaders that are talking to Trump's secretary to figure out what's happening in Europe. Meaning the security architecture of Europe is being determined by the Russian and the United States president, with Europe on the sidelines talking to the secretary to figure it out. And yet they're putting out a strongly worded statement about their displeasure, backing Zelensky in his displeasure. If Trump walks, this ends, period. And I don't mean in the context of the entirety of it. I just mean in the context of the specific war that is happening right now. Because here's the thing. I know there are a lot of people who are very over the moon about this. But at what point do you get the sense that the United States is a trustworthy actor? Did you get that sense with Minsk I? Did you get that sense with Minsk II? Did you get that sense when they were having the Istanbul agreements and they blew off those agreements? Did you really get the sense that the U.S. is a trustworthy actor? Did you get that sense when the U.S. said we're not moving an inch to the east, and they didn't just move an inch to the east and moved all the way to the border? At what point do you get the sense that the United States and Europe are trustworthy actors? So in a negotiation that takes place here, has to ensure that this is not Minsk III. I don't know how the Russians do that, but you have to do that. Maybe you keep your people on the battlefield until they fulfill their end of the agreements. I don't know. Europe is doing everything in their power right now, including Zelensky, to play spoiler, which again is fascinating to me because it's as if they can't see what's happening on the ground. This is, all right, take a look at this. This map is of the battlefield. The red is what the Russians have effectively occupied or taken. Kramatorsk, Slavyansk. Down here is Petrovsk. And up here, this is also the Russians moving. What do you notice? What do you notice? To show you Petrovsk on a map, just so you see what's going on. This is Petrovsk. This is Slavyansk. And if you notice, the Russians are moving through Petrovsk, which is about to fall. Oh, you can't see that. This is the map. Down here is Petrovsk. Up here is Slavyansk. You have Kramatorsk. The Russians are moving up through Petrovsk. This red part on the map. And if you notice, they're also at the top coming down. So in one fair swoop, it looks like when Petros falls, and I think this is constant, I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm not going to say it. It's a pincer. They're surrounding these two major military locations when they take down Petros and when they take down this particular placement up here. Europeans have to know that. Trump knows that. And because the Europeans or Trump knows that, you can't see it, you can't see it. Okay, hold on. Let me share this one more time. All right. Okay, good. Down here is Petrovsk, and the Russians are also up here. This looks like a pincer. And as a pincer, the moment that Petrovsk falls, and the moment that this location up here falls, you're going to get the Russians that are going to be able to sweep across and surround Slavyansk, Kramatorsk. On the map, Petrovsk is at the bottom, Slavyansk is obviously up here. It's a pincer. My point, and I'm going to hit this with Mark, but they're being surrounded. Their main two, or you could say the last lines of conflict, the last military positions that are in Donbass are being surrounded the moment that Petrovsk and the location in the north falls. Trump knows it. I don't know what Europe knows, but you would think that they know it. And yet they're taking this delusional stance of, we must not agree to anything with the Russians. We must accept no land swaps or anything else, and we're going to back Zelensky to the hill. They are utterly and completely delusional. It is weird. It is bizarre. That is the position of Europe right now. Maybe they feel some kind of way because they're on the outs. I don't know. The reality of it is, though, this was provoked more so by the US. It was clear over and over again in one publication coming out in the West that if the US pulls out, it stops. Europe cannot support the war. When JD Vance points out they can buy all the weapons from the United States they want and have at it, they know they can't do that. One, because the United States doesn't really have those weapons to give them in the first place. And B, they don't have the money to do it. If the US pulls out, it stops. That doesn't mean that the US is not going to do everything in their power to play spoiler, or Europe, or for that matter, Zelensky is not going to do everything in their power to play spoiler. Second point, or third point. Do you remember this when this took place? This is Crocus. That is gunfire taking place in the background. That is gunfire taking place in the background. In that gunfire taking place in the background, you had 700 or more civilians that were just murdered by terrorists. 700 or more civilians murdered by terrorists. On the top of those 700 more civilians murdered by terrorists, you had Ukraine doing bombings against rail lines where they were just out to kill civilians. You've had Ukraine try to do attacks on Putin himself directly. One was the drones going after the helicopter, but they admitted that they tried to kill Putin on more than one occasion in regards to an attack. Is it safe for Putin to come to America? So I understand this may be an extreme, let's say, risk assessment. I even understand the level of confidence that it would take for a Russian president to come to America, even if it's Alaska. And I even understand that there is, let's say, sentiment associated with Alaska. But is it safe? These guys have backed one terrorist activity after the next. Is it safe for Putin to come to Alaska? And should he take that risk, even if he thinks it's an extreme risk or it's an out there possibility of anything happening? I don't trust us. I don't trust this. I see my man Laith here, so I'm going to go to Laith. Laith, come on. There we are. How you doing, my man? You doing okay today?
Good. How about you?
I am doing well, actually. It's Monday, so Mondays are Mondays, but otherwise I'm okay. And just for the audience, Laith Marouf, he's an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for the misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. You can find him at Free Palestine TV or Free Palestine.video, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. How you doing today? You doing okay today? You having a good day so far?
Yeah. It's pretty hot outside, so I have the air conditioner on.
That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. Laith, I'm deeply curious about your opinion on what is taking place in Lebanon. The last time that I had you on, you pointed out that you thought it was going to be more difficult to get that legislation through, and that it was going to be holdups and everything. It doesn't seem like they're going to be holdups. It seems like they are pushing hard to get that legislation through. You're getting motorcycles, you're getting protests, you're getting burning tires in the streets in Lebanon, effectively saying this is outrageous, we're not doing this. It is a mass show of support for Hezbollah in this case. But it seems that the US puppet president is pushing very hard to put this and enact this into law and to try to get this done without any guarantees from Israel at all that they would either pull out or stop their attacks. Give me your thoughts. I mean, this seems like a civil war that they're effectively trying to implement.
Yeah, I mean, they are trying to do this, but there's a couple of things that people need to understand right now is that the government is still waiting for a plan by the military, led by the chief of staff, to present them how are they supposed to disarm Hezbollah, and does that plan, would it require them to confront Hezbollah? And up until now, we don't have the chief of staff, the head of the military, bringing his plan. A lot of people within the military that we saw interviews with retired generals and so on over the last week have said they don't think the current head of the military will accept such a move, that General Heikel is a patriot. They also, most probably, he will, if he comes in with whatever plans that he's ordered to present, that will include probably an assessment of what will happen inside the military if such a plan is required to be implemented. And it's very likely that there will be a mutiny, or at least that General Heikel will tell the Lebanese cabinet that requiring the Lebanese military to confront Hezbollah militarily will lead to a mutiny within the military. And that's very normal because, a huge number of the military cadre have family members that are martyred, either as fighters and or civilians that were killed by the Zionist colony. So this is not going to be something that the Lebanese military will willingly go into something like this. And I think there's a lot of exaggeration on what the Lebanese military can do.
Yeah.
It is less armed than ISIS or Al-Qaeda or HTS, let alone the Zionist military. And none of those military forces of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, HTS, or the Zionist colony were able to defeat Hezbollah in any confrontation. And the Lebanese military doesn't have an air force and a drone force and whatever have you, as the Israelis or Al-Qaeda had. So it's a dream, a delusion that the house slaves of the United States that have been, imposed as leaders in the country are, hallucinating, but they are definitely cannot achieve it.
I think the issue is more so the chaos that it causes on the attempt that they try, right? I mean, like the very act of putting that into some kind of legislation and then telling people, okay, we need you to now go out and disarm Hezbollah, which is part of the government and, represented all throughout the society. It's chaos, meaning the entirety of what they're trying to do may not be to disarm Hezbollah because they know they may not be able to do it. What they will be able to do is create a huge amount of chaos in the society on their very attempt. I guess it's that. Or you don't think that's even going to go through? Meaning you don't think that this is even going to happen, let alone they're talking it up, but it's not something they're going to actually try to materially accomplish.
Well, I definitely think they will try to do this. It's not if we look at just what happened over the last 23 months, it's clear that the Zionists are high on the fumes of genocide, and the fact that nobody stopped them and that the West is still supplying them and arming them and financing them and giving them media cover. And we could see the Zionists occupying Syrian territory. We see the massacres in Syria and the mass rapes and killings of Christians, Alawites, Shia, Druze, and that none of that has led to any intervention by the West to stop these massacres because they're all being committed in their name. So why would the Americans and their Zionist, minions here stop themselves from doing the same to Lebanon? So the intention is there. Can they do something like that? Can they achieve the goals from it? That is, I think, where I think they are not going to be able to achieve these goals. And there's many reasons for this. One, you mentioned those demonstrations over the last few days.
Right.
One of those demonstrations, and people can look for this video online, it was hundreds of thousands of motorbikes just roaming the city of Beirut overnight in minutes. And that shows you that Hezbollah can take over every ministry, including the Ministry of Defense and the presidential palace and every military barracks within minutes if they wanted to. Okay, and so that was just a hint to the Lebanese government and military what could happen if they actually go through this. And in 2008, the Lebanese military and government at the time were trying to deliver on an Israeli and American request after the Israeli defeat of 2006 to take over Hezbollah's telecommunications network. And that day, Hezbollah took over practically all of the infrastructure of the country within hours, and then handed them over again, just a show of force. So without firing one bullet. Okay. So this was a reminder right now to anyone within the Lebanese military that thinks that somehow the balance of power changed in the country, which it didn't.
But the president has to know this. Like, meaning he has to know everything that you just said. Why would he push through something that he knows that will never come to pass?
Well, there's a bit of a differentiation between the president and the prime minister, the current prime minister, Nawaf Salam. The president comes from the military, has a history in the military, was the commander-in-chief of the military, and he doesn't have a dual citizenship. He comes from a village in the south, a Christian village in the south that was targeted multiple times, although there's never any fighters in it, by the Zionists over the last war. In comparison to the prime minister, who is a dual French Lebanese citizen, who lived most of his life outside the country, whose whole family and children and so on are outside the country, who doesn't belong to any political party or was in the military, so has no loyalties neither to protect his family, direct family, or his village, or his whatever party or movement he belongs to, or any sector of society. So we have to kind of differentiate the two, and there is a difference, and it seems there is some, small conflict between them on this. And the other thing about the Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, is that he actually comes from a treasonous, collaborationist family, like a aristocratic, land-owning family that collaborated with the Zionists since the 1917. So the grandfather of the current prime minister, Nawaf Salam, owned, bribed Ottoman officials in the 1910s and before World War I to change the land deed records of the Hula Valley. The Hula Valley is that panhandle of Palestine right now that sticks up if you look at the map, which was owned by the Palestinian and Lebanese farmers there. It's a collective ownership, and he bribed the officials and stole the land, and then sold it to the Zionist colonization organizations in the 1920s, okay, for millions of dollars. And similarly, he owned lands in Haifa, the father of the current prime minister, and sold it to settlers also in Haifa. So, his grandfather, Nawaf Salam's grandfather, was attempting to do the same with the land south of the Litani in South Lebanon, to sell it to the Zionists, tried to fight the indigenous inhabitants over the land and try to, find ways that he can falsify the records so he can sell it himself. So this is a family of treasonous collaborationists for 3 generations, okay? So that's different than Aoun and his family and their history. And I would say Nawaf Salam right now is on a razor edge. He definitely is either gonna the whole government's gonna collapse because the Shia ministers are refusing to meet now in the cabinet, which means the whole cabinet is unconstitutional, and or something's going to happen to him if the government doesn't collapse and he doesn't pack up his bags and goes back to the bosom of France. He will be taken out very easily. I think he has no protection in the country.
Basically, he'll lose his head.
He's going to lose his head, or he's going to lose his government. There's no third way around it.
Yeah. Okay. Can you explain something to me about the Lebanese government? From my understanding, it is put together in a very odd way, where there are different factions that control different parts of the government. So if the government and maybe that's not the right question. Let me answer this in a different way. If this is a tactic, what do you think the overall point of this is? I mean, is it to weaken Lebanon to the point where they could be attacked from the north by Jelani's dogs and from the south by Israel? Is it just to create chaos? Is there a larger goal at work? Especially assuming that everybody in this knows exactly what you're saying, that the Lebanese military is not strong enough to do what they're asking it to do, nor is the political situation consistent enough to accomplish that objective. So let's assume that's baked into it, and let's assume that that's known by, let's say, Israel, the US, or whoever is pushing us. Then what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, the point here is if you create enough internal chaos, the job of anybody coming from the outside would become easier. right? If we already know the logical military plan for anybody that's going to attack Lebanon right now is to have HTS attack from the north and the Zionist attack not from the south, but from the east, right in the middle of the country, because now they're occupying all the Syrian side of the border, all the way to the highway between Damascus and Beirut. So they don't need to anymore enter the south of Lebanon. They can just cut the country in half, okay? And that is like a south side of the country now having no Syrian military to defend that area. In 1982, the Israelis attempted to do this as they were entering Beirut, and the Syrian military confronted them on that battlefield right there, and it was the largest tank battle in recorded history since World War II, and the largest air battle since World War II, and the Syrian military, with huge losses, still defeated the Israeli invaders. Now there is no Syrian military to defend that side. In order to achieve this, they would need some internal chaos to help them. That doesn't mean that internal chaos will defeat Hezbollah by itself. But if you have internal chaos and then Israel invades from the east, not from the south, and the Wahhabi death squads invade from the north, then Hezbollah has a harder time defending the country, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let's switch to Gaza for a bit. So recently, you've had this thing where Netanyahu's come out saying that they're going to effectively take over all of Gaza. We're going to take it all. The Trump administration, of course, backs it. Give me your take on these European leaders that after like 2 years have come out. So Australia, New Zealand, England, I believe France, have come out saying, we believe in a Palestinian state and we're going to support a Palestinian state. I'm very cynical about this. I am deeply cynical about this. Give me your take on it, though. How do you view it? Do you view it as this is a win? Europeans who effectively supported this genocide for the last 2 years are now feeling some kind of way because they're sick of seeing Israel shoot dangerous babies in the way that Israel records it. Give me your take on this. Does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter. It's a delay tactic, wasting the attention of their own populations and a kind of a pressure valve diffuser because of how the streets in Europe and in North America are getting to an explosive point. And we already can see the violence building up, and because the states in those locations are not following the democratic will of their people. So that's one side of it. The other side is that they are, if you read into the plans that they put forward, is that they want to have a demilitarized Palestinian state led by the biggest collaborationist in the history of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, that nobody has elected, and with all the resistance groups, meaning 99% of all the political parties in the country being also excluded from governance, and maintaining the apartheid state of Israel.
Right.
So those are the real objectives of this talk about a two-state solution now, when there is no Palestine that you can create separate from its historical context. Definitely, this is all tactics to diffuse and to prop up again the irrelevant Mahmoud Abbas that nobody hears about now, except when YT gives him a seat to talk in front of the cameras. Nobody in Palestine knows what's happening in his life except when he's out on tours with his white masters.
Yeah. Would you call him a collaborator?
He's a treasonous collaborator, definitely. The blood of Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza is on his hands, drenched. The Palestinian Authority security forces have killed at least 40 Palestinians since the beginning of the Aqsa flood in the West Bank, themselves directly killing people. This is a man who has stolen so much money. His children are millionaires in Canada. One of his children is a multimillionaire in Montreal, Canada. People should be looking for his house, try to figure out where the guy lives. Similarly, his other son is in France, also multi-billionaire. So these are the house slaves that will, as we see, Mahmoud Abbas is trying to put out the fire in Master's house by, talking about a two-state solution right now, because Israel's on fire. There is nobody that wants to have Israel, and he's trying to save it by having a two-state solution.
I mean, but see, I always think the two-state solution is a shiny object. I never really thought that it's one of those things that you bring up just to show that you are progressive, quote unquote, on the issue without any real meaning associated with it being a two-state solution. That's the way I always take it, especially now, especially in the most recent, several years. Do you think they're going to be able to accomplish this?
No, a two-state solution is exactly what you're saying. It is a modern Indian reserve. It's a modern African Bantustan. That's what it is. You're talking about demilitarized, has no sovereignty, no control of its borders, and in the midst of colonial, sittings around you of colonies and so forth. That's exactly what a reserve is and a Bantustan. In the Indian nations, indigenous nations in Canada and so on can fly their flag, and they can claim that they have a chief and so forth. But can they print out a passport? Can they do direct trade with other nations? This is what they want the Palestinians to accept, with a covering of a supposed word of a state, but it's not a state. A state controls its territory, the use of violence and trade, foreign affairs, and so forth. None of those would be what the West is now promoting. And anyways, I can tell you for sure they will never even do that. They will never even give the Palestinian a two-state solution.
So what do you think happens? Because something has to give.
Yeah, I mean, look, when this war started, I said this is not going to be a short war. This is the final war here in the region for Palestine. And there will be probably another year of this. And there will be probably 2 million Palestinians killed at the end of this war. But they will cease to exist as a Zionist colony at the end of this. Okay? There's no two ways around it, except for if the West decides to take us to a world war with nuclear weapons being used, and we're all holocausted. So it's either we come out with no more Zionist colony at the end of this, and or there's no more humanity. I think everybody should mentally get ready for this. And anyone that doesn't want us to end up in a nuclear holocaust in the West, any citizens, should take these words seriously and take action to bring their states to heal under the will of their own people, because their elite of the West are willing, up until today, it's very clear that they are willing to take us to a nuclear holocaust to save this Zionist colony. And therefore, people need to take it seriously, citizens of Europe and North America, and take action, physical action, to force your states to abide by your will.
Break that down for me. How do you get from, okay, when you're saying the Zionist entity, are you talking about the ideology, or are you talking about the entirety of the state of Israel itself? That's one. And two, how does it go from these guys are committing a genocide and they're murdering X number of millions of human beings, women, children, old men, fighters, etc., to a nuclear conflict potentially?
Well, because okay, so the first thing is that there will be no more.
Real quickly, there's static coming on yours. Could you go out and come back in? It just started. It wasn't there before.
Static on the mic.
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm just gonna turn it off.
Okay. Yeah, it was fine before. There were no issues.
Now turn it on.
My audience is going to start screaming at me.
Is it good now?
Talk for a little bit.
Let me see if the mic is picking up. Yeah, you can hear it. Is there still static?
It is. Sometimes what happens is stepping out and coming back in fixes it. I don't know why. Okay. Okay. Laith will be right back. Sometimes that happens. Dan Kabbalah is one of those people that happens. He has to leave and come back. It does not sound fine. There's static on that line. I can hear it from my end. It's not good. It's not good. He'll be back. He'll be back. He'll be back. He'll be back. So sad for both of those sides. Sabotage by no knows who. Okay, let me bring it back in.
How is it now?
Welcome back.
Is it better now?
They're saying it sounds fine, so let's go with it. They said we can hear them. This is no issues. Okay, yeah. Just to follow up with the question. Basically, when you said the Zionist entity, do you mean the entirety of Israel in and of itself evaporates? Or do you mean, and for the second part, do you mean, how do you get from that to nuclear war? Meaning if they continue the murder, continue the killings, et cetera, the rest of the world has effectively stood back and allowed them to do this with impunity. How do you get from that to nuclear war?
Okay, so there will not be any more a Zionist colony, which means there will be a Palestine and only a Palestine between the river and the sea. The vast majority of colonists, because they are Jewish supremacists, will leave because they will not accept equality with the Palestinians, and they will go to places where their Jewish supremacy is protected by the law, like in Europe and North America, where up until now it seems like the populace of these countries are fine with being less than themselves. So that's what I mean by the end of the Zionist colony. Where are we going? Okay, so in my opinion, there will be at least 2 million victims, martyrs in this war. We're already past the 500,000 mark. This is even if we don't count what the martyrs in Syria, who in my opinion are all martyrs of Palestine over the last 15 years. But as we can see right now, the whole world not only hates Zionism and Israel right now, the whole world is turning to hate to Jews. Okay, it's not something that I want, but this is the actual result of the inaction of the anti-Zionist Jews to risk their life to liberate their own religion, okay, or risk their life to stop the killing in their name. There's not one Jew on this planet in 100 somewhat years that has done that. So you can see already how normalized it is hate to Jews on X. I mean, I'm kind of surprised at how much it's gone right now. So these are thresholds that have passed that we couldn't have even imagined. Okay, people couldn't have imagined hate for Israel or opposition to Zionism on a global scale to have reached this. I don't think anyone had ever thought that we will get to the point of, again, mass hate for Jews. Okay, so these are all clear signals that there is no return going back for the Zionist movement from this threshold. Okay, how are they gonna integrate in the mind of people in the West that Jews are the most,
most moral military on the planet. Yeah.
Most moral people in history, that they are the eternal victim of humanity since time immemorial. How are they going to do that? They need 2-3 generations of people forgetting this genocide and the crimes that were committed in the name of Zionists inside the United States against the citizens of the US and Europe and Canada, the oppression of the citizens themselves there. How? That's a 3-generation project. It's not going to happen easy. So there's no going back from this point, right? And this is why we see the Zionists and behind them the West getting more vicious, because, well, they realize there's no way they can win a propaganda war anymore. They cannot convince anybody that they are not committing genocide or that they are not the most vicious power that ever existed in human history, not the most moral people. So they're going even more vicious. Okay, like the killing of Anas al-Sharif and the 6 journalists early, before dawn this morning, right? I mean, I looked at, my feed was nonstop. Not people only mourning Anas al-Sharif and the 5 other journalists, but people literally calling for the killing of Western journalists. I have, looked at these Western journalists that have justified, for instance, today, the front page of Bild, the most read German newspaper, is the headline is Israel kills Hamas operative. I mean, I tell you, I am sure there's somebody in Germany right now thinking of killing the editor-in-chief of Bild, and they would deserve it, right? So this is where the point is getting. It's getting to a point of explosion everywhere. So while, yes, the Palestinians are being massacred, genocided, and yes, the Zionists can kill anyone and everybody they want to in this region, their power globally is collapsing, and the amount of supply, money-wise, media cover, militarily, that the West can continue beyond this is clearly now, we can see on the horizon that they have reached the apex of what they can provide the Zionist colony. And from this point on, it's already, the retreat is beginning. Even this fake 2-state solution, conferences and so forth, are already signals of the beginnings of collapse of an homogeneity of the elite in the West, and or what they think is the best path to keep those uppity sand niggers in their place, right? They are confused. They are conflicting on which way to keep those people in place. So it's beginning, and I think the Zionist colony will be defeated if the battle stays this way. We saw how the Zionists attempted to bring in Iran into a war, and the United States, and that the United States and Israel were both defeated because they didn't cross the nuclear threshold. So the only way, from that point on, it was very clear, is that the only way that Israel can survive is with the use of nuclear weapons. Anything less than that is just a delay of the collapse of the Zionist colony, and it will collapse if they do not use nuclear weapons. And that's why I'm warning everybody right now to push their states so the Zionists don't throw us into a nuclear holocaust.
You're making the assumption that they're going to attack Iran at a certain point, that they are not finished. At some point, they're going to feel themselves again, drunk on baby's blood, and they're going to go after Iran another time for an assault.
Yeah, but it's not only that, but look at what's happening in Gaza. In Gaza, they're going to invade right now Gaza City. They're beginning the invasion of Gaza City, but I tell you, they're not going to win, even in Gaza City. They're not going to be able to hold Gaza City. They're not going to be able to occupy Gaza City. And they will have huge losses if they try, and they are going to try, go by land into Gaza City, not just only bombard from air. And there will be huge losses. And if they try to do something here in Lebanon, which they will try, as we started here with the attempts of triggering a quote-unquote civil war, meaning local agents, it's not really a civil war, that are going to fight on behalf of Israel, and or Israel invades and the HTS invades, they will also be defeated. Okay? Huge losses. There will be millions, hundreds of thousands of people killed, not millions, hundreds of thousands of people killed in Lebanon, but they will be defeated. All of these defeats against barefoot fighters in Gaza or in Yemen, and or what will happen here in Lebanon, keep on pushing the Zionists to choose the nuclear option, because they have nothing that they can defeat with the will of the sovereign peoples of Palestine, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iran. So, you know, they can't. Look at how long it took them to defeat Syria.
Right.
15 years, non-stop war. They had to starve the people to their knees. They had to have every last person from the generations before that lived the glories of decolonization to have died and passed away, for a generation to be detached from all their history and so forth. So there's no way to defeat Palestine and or to defeat Lebanon with less than what they did in Syria. 15 years of siege, blockade, bombardment, hordes from all around the world. And they barely could take Syria without Russia's collaboration in that. Okay? So this is not something that they can do easily, and this is only driving them crazier, because they believe they can hold the hand of God and move it, and the hand of God is not moving like they want to.
What do you make of this Abraham Accords? Do you think that this is, I mean, not to mention Azerbaijan becoming a part of this, meaning Azerbaijan seems to be becoming a part of this kind of Israel axis. Azerbaijan is inviting Israel to come over for some kind of religious ceremony, which is wild. And I don't quite know how this axis even formed.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things there. One is the Khazara, which are the origin of all the East European Jews, the converts from Khazara, the kingdom, the Turkic kingdom, are from Azerbaijan, basically.
Interesting.
Okay? So originally, all these Turkic Jews that eventually called themselves Yiddish and lived in Eastern Europe are converts from that region, okay, and the Caucasus. And yeah, so you can see how the connections play out. The other thing is that everybody needs to know, and so we don't exaggerate the outcomes of the Abrahamic Accords, okay, is that every Arabic monarch that is now in existence were all installed by the British.
Right.
They do not represent their people, and that they all collaborated with the Zionists, just like Nawaf Salam's grandfather. They all collaborated with the Zionists during World War I, after World War I, during World War II, and during every war against the Zionist colony since 1948 till now. The Saud family, the Thaniyan family, the Zayed family, the Hashemites, the King of Morocco, all of them collaborated against the Palestinian people at every stage, because they are all installed by the West, the British, and then maintained in power by the Americans. So what is the Abraham Accords gonna do more than they've already done? There was all this big surprise about, oh, a Saudi ship was stopped by dock workers in Italy as it was, taking Italian military vehicles to Israel. This was yesterday, this big story. Italian dock workers demonstrating. They found out that Italian APCs are being put on a Saudi ship that's going to go deliver the APCs to the Israelis.
Right.
So why was everybody surprised? This has been happening since 1912. The Saud family have been in bed with the Zionists. And when I say in bed, it means the Zionists are giving them children to rape as pedophile kings. Okay, people should read actually the history of the Saud family. There's a very famous book that was written by a historian that lived inside the palace of Abdulaziz Saud, the founder of the kingdom. Had pictures even in this book of the king in his last days on a wheelchair with a boy standing beside him that gives him BJs whenever he requires because he can't move.
That is
okay.
grotesque.
So this is the caliber of this leadership. They have the vast majority of probably weapons that killed the Arabs over the last 100 years were paid for by these monarchs. The Gulf money, the oil money has paid for our oppression. So there's nothing that the Abraham Accords actually bring as a gain to the Zionists because they have everything they need from these states. It's just, actually, it only harms these monarchs that are house slaves of the West to openly do this, because till today, the latest, I think, survey a few months ago of the Saudi populace, 99% are against the existence of Israel, not only against its crimes in Gaza. So what does these Abraham Accords add to Israel that it doesn't already have from these treacherous monarchs?
This explains something MBS told Trump once, where he made the point of saying, look, you're basically putting me in a position that is in complete opposition to my population, and my head can be taken. Effectively saying his leadership position is not as stable as it seems, given that the population is so against his support and backing of Israel. Because to your point, what does it look like when 99% of your population is against the state of Israel, and you are formally making a deal with the state of Israel back with the United States in doing so? That looks horrendous. That looks horrendous.
And this is why there is a special British force that has been installed since the 1940s inside the palace in Saudi. British special forces that only answer to the Saudi king, not to the actual British command. And this is why not one Saudi is allowed to serve as in guards of the king's guards. It's all British soldiers. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. So this is how it is. This is the same also in Bahrain, in Qatar, in the UAE. All of them, there is units of special forces of the British that are the ones that are given the power to protect these royals, not even their own citizens. And I want to say one more thing here is that there was also another piece of news that just came out a few hours ago that stupid Zionists, but also, look, they do this on purpose sometimes. They released a video of an Israeli jet refueling on the way to bomb Yemen. And you can see from the video that they're flying over Saudi territory, not even over Saudi naval airspace. No, this is over Saudi kingdom itself, flying over Mecca almost. Okay, so the Saudis and the Emiratis have supplied Israel with its gas, oil, money, food, everything through this supply route from the UAE through Saudi to the Jordan to Israel throughout this war. What is like? Let's be very clear that there is nothing that these house slaves can offer Israel that it didn't already take.
Your point is Abraham Accords don't matter because they're already effectively de facto Abraham Accords.
Exactly. And that's not going to change the opinion of the populace. And as long as there's one Palestinian left, they will be resisting. As long as there's one Arabic person that has pride in themselves, they will be resisting. As long as there's one Muslim all the way in Indonesia, even if they kill every Palestinian and every Arab, remember the Crusaders and killed every Syrian and Lebanese and Palestinian when they arrived. People don't want to remember this. They actually cannibalized whole cities, the Crusaders. 8 people for 3 days in Ma'arat al-Nu'man in Idlib. 3 days they were eating, cannibalizing children and women and so forth. There was nobody left in Palestine after they killed. There was rivers of blood in Jerusalem. Read the records by the priests that walked with the Crusaders' armies and were ashamed at what they saw. Like this now, at least in those times, by the way, some Crusader soldiers rebelled. There's more humanity in those Crusader soldiers that it seems like than the majority of Jews on the world today, that they don't have any self-respect to carry arms or respect to their own religion, that they don't want anybody to curse, to actually carry arms to liberate it from Zionism. But point is, what I'm trying to say to you is that they erased the existence of people in Lebanon, the coast of Syria and Palestine, the indigenous people, when the Crusaders came. And what happened? Other Arabs, other Muslims liberated it and repopulated it. That's as simple as it is. It doesn't matter. If there's one Arab left, they will fight back for this land. If there's one Muslim left, they will fight back for this land. And so it's a lost cause before we even know the ending of it.
But I have to tell you, I was, there were 2 things. One, I was surprised that a genocide could take place. I've been disabused of that. 2, I was shocked that the Muslim world just watched. And what I mean by that is the Arab or the Muslim world. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, even during the Holocaust, it wasn't like forces went in to liberate the Jews short of being in a war. But you have all of these quisling governments that will give lip service. And as you point out, still give weapons, arms, food, oil. Erdogan went so far as to call Netanyahu Hitler, still supplies him oil, still supported the overthrow of Syria. Like, meaning they give words, they don't give action. And I don't see this upswell to take military action against Israel on this. I mean, Jelani and his animals have attacked Muslims constantly. They don't attack Zionists, which again should be a bellwether for who they actually back and who they actually support. Has that surprised you at all, or you just looked at it as, well, these governments are in control, they're not allowing their populations to get involved? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah.
Or is it something that even need to be reconciled?
Well, look, obviously there's a huge difference between the governments and the people. But it is disappointing to have 92 or 100 million people in Egypt, right on the border of Palestine. And other than that one brave soldier at the beginning of the genocide in Gaza who fired on Israeli soldiers and was martyred, the Egyptian soldier on the border there. There hasn't been any Egyptians that have taken risk to confront the collaboration of their government and or to try to breach the siege on Gaza. As the recently released George Abdullah, when he arrived here in Beirut, and the first thing he said is he called on the masses in Egypt. If 1 million Egyptians just reach the border with Gaza, the Holocaust will end. That is true. Now, let's contextualize it in what had happened prior to this genocide beginning. And the West created the Arab Autumn to, on the one hand, fragment the Arabic world in sentiments and attention into their internal issues. On the other, to kill everyone that had led any movement that is pan-identity, pan-Arab, pan-Muslim, pan-African. And we saw what they did with Gaddafi. We saw also, of course, what they did with the Ba'ath Party in Syria. And here we're not only talking about the leaderships of these movements, we're talking about the liquidation of whole bloodlines of anyone that came, that is a thinker, leader in any shape or form that projects those unificationist ideals. So we have now a generation that grew up after the collapse of all these nationalist projects and or unificationist projects, and have no connection to that history and are now masses of leaves blowing in the wind with no roots. Okay, so pity the Arabic people for this. Okay, and this was the biggest ploy. Have you ever seen anything like the Arab Autumn being conducted anywhere else on such mass scale?
No.
So, I sometimes I look at what they did to the Arabic peoples, and I'm like, I'm kind of shocked that there's still somebody like me talking. And it's not only me, obviously. There's hundreds of people like me still talking. This is an achievement that we haven't all, and till today, as we see people in Gaza and Lebanon and Yemen fighting on behalf of all of humanity.
Yes.
Right? So, yes, we have to look at those failings of the Arabic people, and I do not, a lot of, I'm maybe more punishing of my own people when I think of these things. But I understand what happened to the Libyan people, the most proud of the North African Arabic peoples that fought the Italian occupation and suffered the first concentration camps, and the pride that they had, and how they supplied all the liberation movements in Africa, and helped in the liberation of Ireland. And now, 15 years, nobody cares about them. They're living under gangs sent in by the West, and all their oil and gas is being looted. No, we don't even know how many Libyans still exist. Okay. This is how much the West did to us. And so I am amazed that there's still a spirit of resistance in the Arabic peoples. And anyone who's not an Arabic person, especially somebody from the West that is white, have no right to undermine the life in the Arabic people and their love for freedom. It's gonna come. Look at the Western populace. They had all their rights taken away in the last two years. Most of the Europeans have lost all their social services. The Canadians don't have any more healthcare. No. They're being humiliated by their own leadership, and nobody wants to take a risk for their own freedom. So can I then say all European peoples are just lost, and there's no life in them, and why don't they do? I can't. That is humiliating to the human spirit.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to, even with my anger, sometimes I do always return to, okay, what is the human condition that these people are living under? How is it oppressing the will in these people to do something? And of course we can see the machinations of control by imperialism and colonialism always playing there.
Look, I would tell you, ask that question with shame, not to diminish. It's the level of regret, the level of, I don't know, humiliation that my government does shit like this is over the moon at this point. I have watched my government knock over one country after the next in the Middle East. And we don't talk about it in those terms. Like, meaning we don't talk about Syria being overthrown as this is horrendous. Look at the ethnic cleansing. We triumph it in the newspapers. Oh, look at us doing this. This is freedom. This is liberation for Syria. Or even the overthrow of Gaddafi. Hillary Clinton comes out and says, we saw it, he came, he died. They sodomized the guy with a machete. And they didn't care after the fact that they were selling Africans in slavery from one of the richest countries in Africa. Like, when I say this stuff or when I ask these questions, it's, I don't know, it's out of regret, it's out of shame. It's not out of trying to undermine the condition that the West has put those countries in. I hope that makes sense. That's not where this is coming from. It's coming from a different place. But I was surprised that there wasn't more of a backlash in it, despite the fact that the US and the West was effectively causing it. It was
By the way, there's right now, I think, around 20,000 Egyptians in jail that have either demonstrated or posted stuff. 20,000 is a huge number, right? And if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, there was that caravan trying to reach the Gaza border.
Yes.
And there was two parts of it. There was people that came in by plane, and then there was the actual land caravan.
They arrested them all.
And what?
They arrested them. The people on land, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So the people that reached by air, they surrounded them. Then they were getting ready to take these buses to Sinai or the Sinai Peninsula, and beat the hell out of them, and then deported all the dual citizens that have Western passports. But till today, it's now a month since then. All the Algerians, Tunisians, Moroccans, Libyans that were caught inside Egypt, their own governments don't give a damn about them, and they are languishing in Egyptian jails. And for sure they're getting tortured. And so this the same happened to the land component. Libya is gang territories, and the eastern part of Libya is controlled by General Haftar, who lived 30 years in Langley, actually in the CIA compound for 30 years until they brought him to Libya. When that caravan reached the areas controlled by Haftar, his militias surrounded the caravan and kept them out in the open air for almost a week with no water, no food, boiling under the sun, beat the hell out of them because these were all Arabic citizens from Tunisia, Libya, and Morocco, and Mauritania. So nobody gave a damn about them. They were lucky to be sent back, because they could have been just all killed right there and then, and nobody would have heard about them or cared about them. So you could see that people are still willing to take risks, okay? And with a little bit more organizing, better organizing, things could go to a different direction, okay?
Laith, you were fantastic. Great breakdown, man. Thank you for this. Laith Marouf, he's an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation, decolonialization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples, and building broadcasting capabilities to misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. You can find Laith on Free Palestine TV, and that's on Twitter, but you can also find him on freepalestine.video. Laith, oh, by the way, is there anywhere else that people can find you? I just want to make sure.
No, I've been ethnically cleansed from the social media virtual reality 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, under orders from the Congress. So
don't feel too bad. My job was taken too from the president, so I feel you on that one. Thank you, man. You be safe, okay?
See you soon, Jamal.
Have a good one, man. All right, Laith Marouf, shout out to him. I want to go to my next guest, the man himself, Mark Sleboda. You are the one that I am interested in talking to today, Mark. I am super curious on your take. Mark Sleboda is an international relations and security analyst. You can find him on Boosty, Boosty. Either put in Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda or just put in Mark Sleboda. His information will come up. I've said it before. I'll say it again. He is the best in the business. His analysis is bar none. Mark, how you doing, man? You doing okay today?
Jamal, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you for the obsequious flattery. And I'm alive. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's just being honest. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. I've tend to be honest on that stuff to my mom's. She hates that because I can go either way. It's like, why? Everybody is saying this is a great guy at the funeral. Where are you getting this from? Mark, of course, the big news is Trump and Putin running hand in hand into the sun, ending the war with stuff coming out of space, and congratulations at a cosmic level. Of course, I don't believe that, but I do believe that things have gotten so bad on the battlefield that Trump didn't want to go through the secondary sanctions because he knew there was going to be a backlash. And two, the Ukrainian military is in that bad of a shape. I want to show you a map. You told me I was wrong when I showed this map, and I'm going to show this map again because I want to try to reemphasize the point. Mm-hmm. This is right here. These two regions. So below, let me blow this up. All right. Below is Petrovsk, which is coming out of this arrow. And I can show it on a different map just so everybody else can see it too. If you're looking at it, this is Petrovsk. This is coming up, this Kramatorsk, Slaviansk. Let's flip back to the other map. The Russians have also taken the top. This looks like a pincer to me. Now they've cut off the rail line or the transportation line, meaning they have control of that. It looks like they're forming a pincer. And it looks like when Petrovsk falls, I think this is, it starts with a K. I'm not going to mispronounce it.
Konstantinovka.
Thank you, Konstantinovka. It looks like when both of these falls, it immediately creates a cauldron around Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, which is the main two or the last remaining battle lines in Donbass. Am I wrong in this?
Well, I mean, if you're expecting Russian troops to loop around behind and collapse the two cities, no. Is it a deep flanking and isolation? Yes. These are different things. That's still a very, very large stretch of territory. and you're not going to see Russian troops, right, circling all the way around them in some type of
Cauldron.
real cauldron, right? What you're seeing is them being flanked, their supply lines being cut and exposed to artillery and drones, right? Their supply lines and their logistics. And effectively, at some point, that may become an operational encirclement, right?
Okay.
Which is where that is a result of the deep flankings. But I still don't think that it is practical that you're going to see, some actual physical circular maneuver where that entire still quite large area is, physically separated by Russian troops.
Okay. Fair enough. It just looks like when the Ukraine has been pressured on multiple fronts, Zaporozhye, Kherson, in this case, Petrovsk, Konstantinivka, I believe. I'm butchering that name, but you understand what I'm talking about. And it seems like when those fall, then all of them are, if not encircled, as you point out, flanked, meaning all of those territories are in danger all at once.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
With the U.S. being perfectly aware that, oh my God, this is a disaster. This is a crisis.
Yeah, and more importantly, Pokrovsk, now, when you look at it on that map, relatively close to Konstantinivka, it looks close up. But Pokrovsk isn't a built-up part of an urban agglomeration, which is to say that there is a separated area between them and the areas to the north. This small section, Kramatorsk to the south, and so on. Now to the north, right, you've got the bottom of the Kiev regime's last defensive line, Konstantinovka, and that's actually real easy. If it Konstantinovka, Konstantinovka, right? All right. So that will be very important if that falls, right? And all signs are that is going to go, in terms of this combat relatively quickly, because the Kiev regime is just not able to form a defense at this moment that is able to stop Russian forces, right? They're doing everything they can, and at best, they're slowing them down, and that is not happening, enough. In the past, I mean, we saw the Battle of Chasiv Yar went on for over a year, right? The Battle of Avdiivka was fairly lengthy. Mariupol held out for months, that sort of thing. I don't think that's the situation, and part of that is the tactics that Russia is now able to use with these vast flanking maneuvers, right? That develop into operational encirclements. They don't have to take these places head on like they did with Bakhmut, right? Well, I mean, admittedly, that wasn't the Russian Ministry of Defense. That was Wagner and Prigozhin. But you don't need to see that. And this deep flanking, right, and the operational encirclement being established, effectively choking these areas of supplies, is proving extremely effective. I mean, it's not like it's a novel tactic, right? It is more complicated and more demanding to carry out militarily than you might think. Particularly, with this era of drones and precision strikes and satellite reconnaissance and everything like that. Russia is able to accomplish this now on a regular basis with every area they come to, because of their manpower advantage, because of their advantage in the air, right? Whether we're talking, FAB glide bombs, or even drones, where they, no matter what, they may try to claim, in the Western mainstream media, Russia has a decisive advantage, and their logistics, of which Russian logistics are extremely well organized. The Kiev regime, on the other side, has a manpower shortage. They're not able to defend everywhere, even along their defensive line. And that is not my words. That is the words of Ukrainian commanders countless times in the Western media, over the last month or so in all of these hot places. And they're also suffering a dearth of supplies from the West at this point. Not so much a question of political will. It's the West. The West has empty inventories, empty coffers. They cannot supply more because their military industrial complex can't ramp up production and can't meet the demands, and they've taken everything off the shelves. So that is a direct result of the war of attrition. Now, the butcher's bill for at least 2.5 years, well, it is 3 years, yeah, for 3 years worth of war of attrition is coming due.
The reason I'm starting with this is because I want to give context to why Trump is in such a hurry to have this meeting. If you notice, it was, all right, it comes due on the sanctions on Friday. Then it became, we need to have a meeting with Putin immediately. And of course, he comes out and they say, okay, well, what are you offering? Because it's Trump that sent Witkoff to make an offer.
Yes.
The West, or some people in the West, are reporting it the other way around, as if
they are. That's the way Trump said it. The Russians want to talk to us, right?
But that was nonsense.
That's not. That's Trump being Trump, right?
Yes. So this is Trump when they ask him, "Hey, what are you going to talk to Putin about, and what is this meeting going to be about?" Because they've been tight-lipped. Finally, Trump shuts the hell up and actually goes to negotiate, as opposed to blabbing everything that's taking place. This is Trump. This is Trump.
You're looking at territory that's been fought over for 3.5 years with, a lot of Russians have died, a lot of Ukrainians have died. So we're looking at that, but we're actually looking to get some back and some swapping. It's complicated. It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories.
Mark, they're going to be swapping the territories?
I don't think so. I don't think that any of this is actually going to happen. So yes, Trump is being driven, right, by panic and desperation. Whether he actually feels panic and desperation is another, but the situation is panic and desperation, right? And his military people, his intelligence have obviously gotten through to him that the Kiev regime's front line is crumbling everywhere. And there is the potential in the months ahead for what you might call a collapse in some areas, or at least very more rapid Russian advancement than we have seen likely, right? And that this could lead, right, next year to a move on Kiev, for instance, right? That's entirely within the playbook. And even if we're just talking the Donbass, it is still possible for Russia to take all but, right, close enough to all of the Donbass by the end of this year, the way things are going on the battlefield, right? Finishing up Pokrovsk and Seversk, Pokrovsk in the south, Seversk in the very north, and taking out this last defensive line of Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, Konstantinovka. That is entirely within the realm of possibility. If not all taken, then all but taken. And at that point, Russia has all of Donbass, and that changes the negotiations, right? Of any type of even belief in a negotiated, a frozen conflict. By the way, I'm not a fan of. I don't believe that such is in the interests of Russia, and I very much doubt that it is something that the Europeans or the Kiev regime will ever agree to. And we'll come to that. But this is being driven by panic. That's why 50 days to 10 days, 10 days to less than that, at least on there. I don't know if you've seen it. I posted it in one of my videos at the end of last week. Are you familiar with the Eurasia Group? Ian Bremer.
No.
Now, okay, so despite the name, they're a pro-Western hegemony, shall we say, private think tank organized by Ian Bremer. They've been around for a fairly long time. You know, they're very much anti-Russian. He's rebranded, shall we say, the media PR wing of this as G0 Media. He wrote a book, G0. You know, there was everyone was talking about G10, G2, G this, G that. His big selling point that he said, well, he talked about a G0 world, right? So he ram-rated everything as G0. Anyway, so he's online. He's got, you know, a very, you know, it's a think tank established. They've got a presence, right? They're not Rand, right? Or, you know, something, but, you know, they create noise, right? They're significant.
They create noise.
Yeah, they've got a drolly amusing geopolitical puppet show as part of their media wing called Puppet Regime.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mostly about world leaders, right? You know, done as puppets, right? Interacting. And it is drolly amusing, right? If you can suffer through the inevitable Western moralizing and posturing, you know, Putin is evil, because Putin's always inevitable, you know, the biggest of you know,
bad guys.
Of the bad guys in this. Also, to an extent, Xi Jinping and so forth. So it's very much from a Western perspective, but it doesn't mean that it can't be drolly amusing. Well, there was a scene last week in a skit they did where that has Putin, Trump talking, and in the background there is standing Modi and Xi Jinping. And Trump is like, you're gonna agree to a unconditional ceasefire. You're gonna agree to it. Putin's no means no. And then Trump is Trump. I'm so angry. I'm gonna do something serious. And he hits Modi in the face.
What?
And Putin, the Putin puppet, is there. Holy shit, right? You know, and Modi's like, why did you do that? Why did you punch me? Right? You know, and Trump is, well, someone has got to pay the price for Putin not doing what I say, and it's not gonna be me. And Modi points to Xi Jinping, who's standing there smoking, and says, well, why didn't you hit him? He's buying even more from Russia than I am. And, you know, Xi Jinping goes, you know, and Trump is, well, you know, we talked about it and it's kind of complicated. And, well, you know, you know, and that's this, you know, it's not long. It's like a minute, but it
It's
actually
funny because it's true. I mean, he did
it is.
with India. Yeah. Promoted.
Because you're the weakest one in the room, right? You know, that's it. So I you know, I think it's funny that is also part of that desperation. But even if those tariffs, they're not actually like you think they are, right? First of all, right, it was 25% general tariffs, right, as part of Trump's tariff war on the world, and then an additional 25% punitive payments because they continue the oil trade with Russia. And Trump can't do it against China because they just lost a trade war against them. And they're still in negotiations, you know, hammering out the aftermath of that. So they can't, they're too exposed on a U.S. China cutting the U.S. off from rare earth minerals and other important things that they need for their defense companies and high-tech industry. That China has a veritable monopoly over, at least in the quantity and the quality that they need, right? So you can't. I mean, what are you going to do? China will just cut you off again. So China has leverage, big leverage, that the Trump administration didn't seem to know going into their giant 125%, whatever ridiculous number of tariffs they were tossing at China, only to get bitch slapped around by China. So you can't punch him, right? So that's what it is. But the need to that threat of those tariffs has backed Trump into a corner domestically as well,
Yes.
because he came out with a lot of bluff and bluster, and this is how he's going to get Russia into line, and he can't do it because sanctions on Russia don't mean anything. He knows that. He's acknowledged that. And the two biggest purchasers of Russian oil, which is what they're going after with this tariffs, is China, which they can't go after because they just lost the trade war, and India, which they can go after, but that's going to have big diplomatic and geopolitical consequences,
right
because
right
the
there.
U.S. has been trying to crawl into bed with India, to position them basically as Ukraine against China, right? For decades now. I mean, that whole adoption even of the term Indo-Pacific, which no one used, right? Just over a decade ago. That was, it's an attempt to lure India into a U.S. containment and confrontation grouping against China. Well, the result of this, of course, is the exact opposite. Modi is going to Beijing for an upcoming SCO summit. They may potentially be canceling U.S. military contracts. That's still kind of being reported on both sides of the issue, but obviously Modi getting closer to Russia as a result of that as well, and certainly not cutting off the energy, the oil. But even those 25% punitive tariffs, that punch of Trump's, he's pulling the punches because of the potential economic consequences.
Right.
India does $120 billion worth of exports, roughly, a year to the U.S., right? Now, the big industries there are gem and diamonds, right? Pharmaceuticals, IT services, and electronics, like smartphones and other things. And those tariffs, those 25% tariffs, only actually cover 20 billion of that 120 billion. The rest of it is all exemptions. Why? Because the U.S. needs that stuff. So it's only the gems and diamonds that is actually being tariffed by that punitive tariffs. Everything else is, the pharmaceuticals, the electronics, the IT services, those Indian call guys, right? That's all being exempted. Right? It's not being talked about, right? But it's being presented as if these tariffs are more punitive than they actually are. Because everything with Trump is always about performance, right? Performative theater. This is him, if he can't show a victory, then he has to show how big and bad he is, right? He's got to strut. And this is, strutting. Now, India still can't accept this, obviously. It's still a blow to them. Just in terms of economic sovereignty, and if you want to talk in fairness terms, right, why does India get punished and not China or the other biggest suppliers? They fall down quite a bit after India and China, which together eat up something like 80% of Russia's oil exports right now. Wow. But then you've got Turkey, which is an EU, a NATO member, right? And another critical geopolitical crux point, whose leader, Erdogan, is the cunning beast who's so good at playing the US and Russia and everyone else off of each other. So you're going to threaten him, and what's he going to do, right? Then he'll move closer to Russia, and you'll lose out. So they can't go after him. And the EU is already barely surviving, and they're having problems, of course, with energy. So you can't really punish them any more than they're already being punished on top of it. They're trying to get rid of Russian energy. They're not really economically sustainable without. I mean, they're no longer economically competitive, right? And they're suffering with how much they've cut. If they cut that last little supply line, then they're dying. I mean, that's the difference. So all of this it's largely performative. And this whole thing, like Alaska, who saw that coming? No one saw that coming, right? No one. Putin was talking UAE.
Right.
The leader of the UAE was just, and that makes sense. The UAE, like Saudi Arabia, is a Middle East country that has good relations with both, right? UAE is now part of the BRICS, right? Which Trump will never admit out loud. But the UAE also hosts a giant U.S. military base, right? CENTCOM is right there. So that makes a lot of sense, right? If not Saudi Arabia, then the UAE. If not the UAE, all right, Istanbul. Erdogan is hardly a neutral player in this. He's literally played both sides. He's screwed both Russia and Ukraine on this to his advantage. But I guess you can look at it as kind of neutral in that regard. So, Istanbul could continue. But Alaska, where is that coming? I mean, that's just bizarre. I mean, yes, technically Russia and the U.S. are close there, but it's kind of the ass end of both countries. It's
yeah. Do you trust that? I mean,
no, I don't. I mean, there's a logic point of me that says that, I mean, they understand in the U.S. that would probably mean nuclear war. I mean, like that if they did something, like it would definitely mean war. But the U.S., I mean, these aren't necessarily sane and rational people, and decapitation strikes have kind of become a hallmark of them in Israel, right? Iran attempted decapitation strike, Hamas, Hezbollah, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, which Trump was, by the way, just obscenely gloating about in the last week again. I don't trust it. I would not do this. This is the Kremlin's decision. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake to have this meeting.
I think showing confidence. I mean, what's the motivation for him to go to Alaska? Russia owes the U.S. nothing on this. The U.S. started a war that got hundreds of thousands of Russians killed.
So my take is that the Kremlin is still engaged in what you might consider diplomatic maneuvering, right? They recognize that Trump is in a bad position, right? Geopolitically, because he's got to preserve a failing proxy regime in Kiev. Even if he doesn't much like Zelensky, and he has nothing but contempt for him. Even if he doesn't like European leaders, even if he personally doesn't give a flying fig about Ukraine. Yes, all of that is true at some level, but he's still the U.S. president. He's still the leader of U.S.-led Western hegemony, and there are enormous institutional pressures from Congress, from the deep state, from the media, from the European, everything on him that demands that he do something to save that proxy regime, right? And a frozen conflict is about the only thing that can save it right now, right? Ending it on the contact lines, which is what is being presented more or less. That's what he's trying to do. And in a way, this is Minsk 3, Minsk 4, right? I mean, this is
unless you talk about Istanbul agreements,
so because that's what they're attempting to do, right? Once again, having failed at the escalate to de-escalate, right? They're now going to the diplomatic track, and what they're ultimately trying to do is freeze the conflict and rebuild Kiev, right? That ultimately that's what they're trying to do, because they're certainly not preparing to surrender Kiev, right? That is something that Trump knows that he can't do. Right. If he mollifies Russia with a little bit of territory. Now, you notice the things that aren't being talked about, right? First of all, Russia's not saying anything, right? As Russia does, right? You're hearing all kinds of different reports from Bloomberg, from the Wall Street Journal, saying different things about what the U.S. proposed and what they will be talking about in Alaska, supposedly. This idea of a land swap. And what they're talking there essentially is parts of Ukrainian territory, right? So The Kiev regime still holds on to parts of Donetsk, right? And parts of Kherson and Zaporozhye. In Kherson and Zaporozhye, of course, it's actually the capital cities of those two regions that they hold. And Russia holds Ukrainian territory also in Kharkov region, in Sumy region, and some now in Dnipropetrovsk region, right? Then there's also the small little Kinburn Spit, which is actually part of Mykolaiv region. That's another story, small. So the idea being floated is either, right, first of all, let's make it clear, Ukraine holds no Russian territory, right? There's some people in the Western media that are still trying to claim that there's 1 or 2 square kilometers of forest, because Zelensky is saying that. It's not true. There's no Russian territory, right? That was ended quite a while ago. So the idea is that these excess territories would be traded for the rest of the territory of the Donbass, or if Russia is still sticking by their guns, which I believe they would, the rest of Donbass and the rest of Kherson and Zaporozhye. And that is where the Western media accounts diverge. So we have no clear picture of that there. But what no one is talking about still is Ukraine and NATO.
Right.
And
which is the issue.
And how that, I mean, to me, that's the most important issue. There are lots of other issues, but that's the most important issue, right? Ultimately in strategic terms. And that's not being talked about. And there's no talk about how Trump could guarantee that into the future for future U.S. leaders, right? So forth, right? So there's no discussion of that happening at all in the public view, at least. There's no talk of demilitarization, which is part of Russia's, primary. They would limit the size of a future Ukrainian military to quite small. Right, a constitutional return to neutrality that they had before the U.S. backed putsch in 2014, which, by the way, is why all of Zelensky's claims, I can't possibly give up land, it's in the Ukrainian constitution. Well, that's really funny, because the way you got rid of Yanukovych was against the Ukrainian constitution, and you changing your constitution away from neutrality towards an enemy of Russia and joining NATO, enshrining that wasn't in your constitution. It is now, and so forth. I mean, they've made lots of changes to their constitution, so that's a nonsense argument, right? But he's using that as a fig leaf, a shield at this point. That's not being talked. And the denazification, the de-banderization of Ukraine, which, I'm sorry, is only possible, and even then to a very, shall we say, contested degree, if Russia physically occupies all of Ukraine, as far as I'm concerned, right? Nothing else would meet that, right? Until they're prevented from their lustration, preventing them from holding political office, taking away all of the gazillion things in Ukraine that have been renamed after Bandera and Shukovich, until Azov and 36 other Banderite groupings and battalions and political movements are banned, until they're rooted out of the police, the security services, the military, right? That's a major, it can't really happen, right? And of course, that's the biggest fudge area. And there may be an assessment at some point in the Kremlin that, we just can't do that, right? And that is, shall we say, negotiation room, that there still will be a anti-Russia at the end of this. I think that would be a titanic mistake. Personally, I've long held that position going back to 2014. But, I don't decide things, for the Kremlin, and they've got a lot more intelligence, behind the scenes than I do. So that, they will make their call, and I will armchair it, as will all of us. But that's not being talked about, and that makes me very suspicious about what's going on. We know Rubio let slip that the U.S. and Russia have actually held discussions right? Physical discussions, maybe on the sidelines of one of the Istanbul meetings that were not made public, right?
Mhm.
So there may have already been some feeling each other out on these things happening. But of course, the big story of this is not only is Putin going to Alaska and then supposedly for the next meeting in a process, if that happens, Trump would then come to Russia. That's the quid pro quo
Oh, really?
there. Yeah, that's
I didn't hear
already
that
been
part.
said. That's actually been said. Yes, yeah. The West isn't talking about it, but Russia is talking about it. That's what was agreed on. So, for
No,
me,
go ahead.
it is a concession that Putin made to Trump to meet with him in person. Right now,
The question is, what is that concession?
yeah.
It's
Well, I
what
mean,
do.
the meeting itself is a concession. That
Oh,
Russia
you mean coming
gave
to Alaska in and of itself is a
yes,
concession?
meeting him now. Or Putin they've been saying just last week, the week ago, they were saying, yes, Putin and Trump will meet someday when all the diplomatic work the hard diplomatic work is done, and there's something with an agenda and something for them to sign and make real progress at the end of it, right? They don't want a photo op where Trump pressures Putin to things that Putin has to say no to. Right. That was what that could potentially then lead to some type of emotional tantrum and escalation from Trump. Trump thinks that if I can just meet with him physically, right, my ginormous ego and charisma will somehow make him concede on things that he's long held positions that are unacceptable to us for over a year. And so that's what he thinks, right? That's his art of the deal. Right, that's what he thinks, and Russia knows that that's the way Trump works, and that's why they've tried to avoid it. But they've agreed to this now. So the question is why? Because, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say. I mean, the way that the Russians say, Trump offered something that the Russians thought were acceptable, or at the very least,
that's
a negotiation point.
That's something that Ushakov said,
right?
And it's not been elaborated on at all. So a lot of people are perhaps reading more into it than is there, or maybe not. Maybe there is, right? Maybe this land swap that Trump is mentioning has been worked out to a greater degree, right? Than we know. We don't know.
Right.
I think that the Kremlin realized that Trump is in a bad position. He's in a bad position geopolitically over this, right? He needs to save a Kiev regime, and he's a bad position diplomatically, domestically, because he's promised all sorts of things, but he's bluffed and blustered, and his bluff has been called, and he can't go through with further tariffs because of the economic consequences, the backlash, the high inflation, the price of gasoline in the U.S. rocketing up, etc. He can't go through with that. So he needs distraction. He needs an escape clause. And I guess he's not comfortable throwing the Epstein files out to distract him. So hence Russia has agreed to this meeting. Now, what I believe is not that Russia is, I do not believe that the Kremlin would actually agree to a land swap that kept the Kiev regime in power. Certainly one that did not give them all of Kherson and Zaporozhye, and that just resulted in a frozen conflict, and with them still talking about dragging Ukraine into NATO and the EU and rebuilding it and everything.
Right.
I think that the Kremlin understands that the EU and Kiev will never agree to any of this, no matter what Trump does, right? Trump has shown great ability to leverage European leaders on trade issues and gotten them to roll over on tariffs, but not on anything geopolitical. The opposite, right? Trump has, over the last few months, been nudged and leaned and lured ever closer to the Kellogg-Macron Starmer position, right? Than he was when he first came in and things that were said. So he has gone more in the Kiev regime direction over the last few months. Now we see this suddenly from their perspective about face, and everyone is screaming and crying and everything. But Trump, I do not believe, has the ability to force Kiev and Europe to do what he says on this, right? I don't think that is something that will even be, shall we say, embraced by much of the U.S. government. Like Congress will be completely against it, right? Both sides of Congress, right? Yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene may agree. Again, the opinion of the majority of Congress on both sides is clearly known on this. The deep state, the blob, right? The media, right? Everyone will be against this, right? So there'll be huge institutional pressure from within the U.S. Europe and Kiev will never agree to it. And I think the Kremlin, thinking, just a move or two ahead in chess terms, understands that. And they're playing a diplomatic maneuver here. They know that this is not going to be, if there's an agreement and hands are shaken and Putin and Trump are smile at each other, they still know that this will never be instituted, that this will collapse in no time, right? It will never be agreed upon. And it will be back to, or it will never stop the movement on the battlefield. For instance, one of the things that's being discussed in the Western media, again, without confirmation, is that the first step in this process would be the Kiev regime withdrawing from all of Donbass at the least, right? And only then would there be a ceasefire.
It would have to be.
Yeah, and they won't do that, right? So that's the end right there, right? So things may never even stop. But I think the Kremlin is calculating that going through this process and having Kiev and Europe sabotage it, as they inevitably will, and we'll be lucky if we don't see false flags and provocations and everything else in the next week or so, right? But that they will sabotage it. And then Trump's anger, right, will be redirected back at Kiev, at Zelensky and the Europeans. And that will provide Trump with another opportunity, as if he hasn't had enough already, to walk away from this, right? And at the very least, it will cause further damage in the U.S.-European relationship, the transatlantic relationship over this. And that's why I think that and they're also, shall we say, giving a sop to Russia's allies in the BRICS, saying, look, we're trying hard to go through the diplomatic process, but what can you do, right?
Yeah.
So that is kind of a solve on Modi, oh, let me kiss the boo-boo that Trump gave you, that sort of thing. That's another a diplomatic angle on why Russia is going through this charade. Now, my personal opinion is that both sides are going to regret this meeting, because whatever is agreed to or not agreed to, it will never actually be implemented anyway, right? I don't believe that there's any chance of it being implemented, not at the current time. There's just, that's not a possibility on the battlefield or politically for Kiev or Europe. And that means that we don't know where Trump's anger coming out of this is going to end up, because he's the chaotic bouncing Betsy bomb, right? Your mind, whatever, you don't know where his anger is going to lie. I know he thinks that he's kicking the can down the road of his punitive tariffs threat and everything that he can't follow through on, and he's distracting, and now he doesn't have to follow through on it. But that's only kicking the can down the road. And then he's going to have to pay a greater penalty for, quote unquote, surrendering Ukraine to Putin, because that will inevitably be the dominant narrative being pounded through the media, being yelled at from Congress, everything else that will come out of this. So ultimately, I don't believe it will improve his domestic position. I think it will worsen it. And if Trump comes out of this angry, and that falls on Russia, and then there's a renewed, return to escalate to de-escalate, then that will end badly for Russia. So I don't think that this bodes well. I think that there's no possibility of anything. First of all, is something agreed upon? If it is agreed upon just between the US and Russia, it can still never come to fruition because Kiev and Europe will never agree to it. And then how does the diplomatic cards of the disappointment and frustration of Trump fall out? And how much is, domestic political feces does he take from it?
Let's assume for the moment that Trump is not interested in Ukraine, which I don't think he is. Let's assume for the moment that he's an American president. And well, he is, but we don't have to assume that. But as an American president, he's stuck with various...
Yeah, he has little power. He has limited options.
He has no cards in this process, but he has to look tough and save face in this process.
He's always got to win, too. His ego demands that, right? Trump always has to win, right?
But this is not a process where you can win because he has no cards. Now, he had to look like it at the very least. Let's assume that you're right, that he goes through this process. The US and Russia has already a tentative something in mind. Because again, the notion that Putin would come to Alaska only to tell Trump no is amazing to me. Looks like they would have to.
I don't think he has to tell him no, though. That's the thing. He can tell him yes, and it will still be no because Kiev and Europe won't go through it. I mean, they will never agree to it.
Putin can't give more than what he has already told.
Putin can say, I will agree to this if the following steps are followed. And if the steps are not followed, then it's not my fault, it's their fault.
Okay, but he can't say, okay, you can take Kherson and you can take Zaporozhye, and I'm just.
No, he will say this is the beginning of a diplomatic process. And the first step is this. And then there are other possible steps, right, that can be firmed out later if that first step is met. But if that first step is not met, well, then, it's a.
If Europe balks, and if Ukraine balks, which they already have, by the way, they've already rejected anything that they're trying to come up with. It gives Trump the ability to walk. Hey, I tried it.
Again,
Or you don't think he could do that? I mean, because from my point of view, he's like, look, I did everything I could. I tried to bring these guys together. They're both horrible people. I have other concerns. They're blocking me. They're blocking me about. Or you don't think he could do that?
Look, there is no question that less military aid has flowed to the U.S. or to the Kiev regime in Ukraine from the U.S. in the last 6 months than in the last 6 months of life. There's no question about that. There's also true that some military aid has gone through, right? Not only the stuff that Biden agreed to in long-term contracts, the monthly production of the military-industrial complex and everything, right? But there have been smaller, I would call them maintenance packages, of 100, 200 million here, 300 million there that Trump has signed off on as well. And they have not been widely talked about, but they've been happened and reported, right? So that, again, that alone can make the conflict still drag it on for another year or so. Again, depending on where Russia stops, right? Because Ukraine is a big country, and militarily occupying Ukraine, how much of Ukraine are we talking, is a big deal. That's lots of troops. That's lots of economic responsibility. It's a tall order. So we don't know where the Kremlin is ultimately going to stop, if assuming that the battlefield moves forward. Europe can still keep the Kiev regime forces fighting. I mean, they could still conscript 18 to 25-year-olds and add another 100 or 200,000 bodies to it. They've talked multiple times about conscripting women. They've begun the training of 14-year-olds in schools. They've now allowed the recruitment of people over the age of 60. They can keep this going, right? Not because that will present an effective military resistance, simply because Ukraine is big and rooting out every building from every 60-year-old guy or 19-year-old guy given a gun and backed up by even drones, it still takes time. It's still difficult, right? This could be dragged out, longer, and Russia doesn't want it dragged out longer, but they're fully prepared for it, and it can be dragged out that way, even with the level of the tepid level of support that's coming from Trump now. Russia would like Trump to drop even that tepid level of support, because that means it could be finished to a greater extent faster, right? At a less cost to Russia. But how likely is that? How much power does Trump have to surrender Ukraine in the face of opposition from both houses of Congress, from the deep state, from many people within his own administration, from the media, from the Europeans? The US president has enormous powers on paper, but when it comes to key geopolitical issues like this, that are matters of world order and US-led hegemony, I don't think he actually has that much power. He may want to, at one level, when he talks to one person, to wipe his hands of this whole thing, but he can't do it. He can't. He's the US president. And the game goes on.
Personally, I think he can create a context where he doesn't. Trump, beyond any other president that I've seen, has this ability to just not care. Like, I give you another example. When the financial system was crashing and Trump was like, I'm sanctioning the world, and you had the stock market falling like 1,000 points a day, usually a president wouldn't be able to withstand that. Trump was eating hamburgers, didn't care in the least. The only time Trump cared is when, hey, the full faith and credit of the U.S. was being challenged.
But he also backed off the tariff war on the world.
He did, but he backed off the tariff war because the bond market was flipping out. And they were telling them, hey, the faith and credit of the U.S. government is under threat and attack. And that's when he said, okay. When stocks were dropping 1,000 points a day for like a week, Trump didn't care one iota. I agree with you that it's a heavy, tall order for a U.S. president to be like, I'm done. Yeah. I'm out. I quit. And they say, oh my God, you're abandoning Ukraine.
He's already said, I'm going to quit. How many times already? I mean, how many times has he said it? And has he done it? No. I'm a cynic and a realist, right? I cannot hope that Trump will do the logical thing when he is surrounded by so many people and institutions compelling him to do the opposite. I just can't count. If you want to hope on that, that's fine. If I'm wrong on that one, I'm willing and eager to be wrong on that one. I don't
I'm not
see it.
postulating anything. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying of everybody, he is the only one that would have the stone.
If it was at all possible under any president, yeah, sure. It is more possible under Trump than anyone else we could conceive of at this moment being elected in the United States, simply because he loves flipping the bird at the establishment whenever he can get away with it, right?
Yeah.
I just don't think that this is going to be one of those situations.
So last question. If you had to make a prediction about Alaska, nothing comes out, or something comes out, but it's not into the war. It's ultimately
there's definitely going to be something that comes out of it, right? It's a bit photo op between the U.S. and Putin.
Right.
They've got to sign something. They've got to smile, and they've got to talk noise about how great it is. But let's come back to that a month later then and see how much of it is actually implemented. And, if not, or to what extent it's not, what the consequences are.
But for all intents and purposes, the Russian military is not going to stop until things are implemented. And
they may slow down a bit. There may be less nightly drone and missile strikes on Kiev for a while, right? That may be a diplomatic nod being made, but that's about it. They're certainly not going to stop moving in Pokrovsk and Seversk and Liman and Kupiansk and everywhere else where they're now, making, again, always good more rapid progress than they were before.
Mark, you are fantastic. Great breakdown. I suppose we'll see what happens on Friday.
Yep.
I'm super curious.
We'll all be tuning in to the Trump-Putin show in Alaska.
I know.
I mean, that's what Trump wants. I mean, he wants everyone watching his show. I mean, he's a, you know, I always, with Trump, I always come back to this scene from the original Gladiator, Scott Ridley's Gladiator, where Maximus is on the floor of the Colosseum. I think it's one of the lesser ones earlier in the thing. And he turns to the crowd after he's finished off the opponent and he goes, "Are you not entertained? Is that not why you are here?" That is why the American people elected Trump, because they wanted to be entertained. Why the hell else would this guy be elected, right? And we're all going to be entertained on Friday, one way or another. I don't like the idea of Putin going to Alaska.
Neither do I.
It's a mistake. It makes me very nervous in here. If they do something stupid, just be aware that, hey, tell everyone you love that you love them. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's the other catch, right? It's so extreme. Like the reality of anything happening would create a response out of Russia that would just be breathtaking.
Yeah.
But again, you have a Kiev government that, all things being equal, wants to draw the U.S. into a conflict, and the U.S. may do it and blame Kiev. I don't think that would matter.
And it doesn't have, it could be someone in the U.S. deep state, right? Yeah. Acting on their own. It's quite obvious that Trump doesn't have complete. Look at all the leaks that happen all the time. That he, I don't. It makes me very uncomfortable. I don't like it.
Mark, like Archduke Ferdinand, right? It's like, hey, the Serbs did it. It's like, well, no, we didn't do it. It was black group.
I just don't think there was any reason. If he has to agree to this. I'm sorry, this theater, if he had to agree to it, then it should have been the UAE. It should not have been Alaska.
Yeah, agreed. Which is what I thought it was going to be. But oh well. Mark Sleboda. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can follow Mark on Boosty, Boosty, under Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, or just Mark Sleboda himself. You can also find him on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. Mark, you are fantastic, man. Thank you for this.
Thanks for having me.
You be safe. All right. Mark, with his damn good analysis as usual. Kit Klarenberg is coming up shortly. He will be here in about 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, I suppose we'll see. I mean, I got to be honest with you. Part of me hopes it's not theater, but that is kind of a hope thing. I have a hard time seeing, A, how do you get any of this stuff through Congress? B, I don't know what these quote unquote swaps are. But clearly they had something in mind before they offered this. And politically, if you're Putin and they're like, hey, we're going to offer X, Y, Z in order to end the war. Okay, if your core interests are being met, to some degree, do you accept? Maybe. Do you know already in advance that Congress would never put this through a treaty? How do you ensure about no NATO expansion? How do you add a provision in that says it can't be Zelensky because Zelensky is illegitimate? Like all of that stuff would have to be on the table considering those are your core demands. So from the standpoint of swaps, I don't know what these swaps are, but we'll see. I mean, Western media has effectively only been talking to itself. When you read through what has been taking place in Western media, it would say a German analyst said this, a Washington analyst says this. We have no idea what is coming out of the Russians at this point. It is a black box. So everything that you read is the West, once again, talking to itself and putting out its hopes, putting out its dreams, putting out its fears. It has nothing to do with what is coming out of the Russian government in regards to what they want. Well, you know what they want. They've already said it. But anything that has been agreed upon in advance. In fact, what this meeting may be is context, like contextual. We've agreed to discuss these items, maybe. Or maybe they discussed on something in advance. Either way, the only way for Trump to get what he wants is to walk. Because the Europeans have already said, we're going to back Zelensky and rejecting everything. Okay, then what are you as an American president going to do? Do you walk? Do you walk? And as Mark said, can he walk? Trump could have walked on day one. He didn't walk on day one because, as the media reported, he didn't want to be blamed for being the loser in Ukraine. I have a newsflash. You will be a loser in Ukraine either way. You're having this panicky, desperate meeting now because of the failings that are taking place in Ukraine and all of those regions that are about to fall all at once. That's not going to change if your deal falls through, meaning you fail either with a collapse or you fail in your diplomatic agenda. Your way out is to walk. You can continue to blame Biden all you want, but there is no win in this. And maybe therein lies the rub. Trump is looking for a face-saving mechanism, and Trump believes that some kind of deal may be a face-saving mechanism. That may be true. But if you can't get the deal over the finish line by putting Europe in its place, putting your proxy in its place, then you just fail on the battlefield, which is going to be a deeply humiliating loss. Think of Afghanistan on steroids. I want to bring my man in. We are joined with the man himself, Kit Klarenberg. Kit Klarenberg is investigative journalist documenting the role of intelligence services in shaping politics and perceptions. You can find his work on Global Delinquents or Grey Zone UK. If I'm not mistaken, though, your last work was on just Grey Zone, correct?
Indeed, yeah. I mean, Grey Zone UK is like a dedicated section of the site. So, I mean, it's maybe giving me too much plaudits to suggest that this is a independent standalone operation. But, yeah.
It's right, wait. It says right here, just for the audience, it just says the Grey Zone.
Indeed.
Good job. Good job, man. Good job.
Yeah. Here
Not
we
just
are.
Grey Zone UK.
Yeah, sure. So no, I mean, it was interesting what you were just talking as I joined about proxies. We see a very interesting, call it a divergence or contrast for the less pretentious. 30 years ago, in my neck of the woods, which is to say the former Yugoslavia, the US was backing neo-Nazi venerating ultra-nationalist lunatics in order to try and break up a much bigger country. Does this sound familiar?
A little bit.
Like that at all? So yeah, no, thank you so much for featuring this. But yeah, so August 4th, it marked the 30th anniversary of Operation Storm, which is it's not particularly well known in the West today. For a variety of reasons, but this was a absolutely extraordinary and explicitly genocidal blitzkrieg, which was carried out by US trained, funded, and armed ultra-nationalist Croatian proxies to expel Croatia's entire Serbian population. And it led to up to 350,000 people having to flee the area, many on foot, I might add, never to return. And the elderly and the disabled and the infirm were executed summarily. It has left deep and cohering scars across the region, which are felt to this day. It also, I think, has informed Western proxy strategy ever since. And it, funnily enough, in the wake of Ukraine's unexpectedly successful late 2022 counteroffensive, a wide variety of sources sought to make parallels with Operation Storm and Ukraine's actions. So it's clearly viewed as a success, even if its results were absolutely horrific. And there are reports from US diplomats who visited the regions of Croatia, primarily Krajina, which is historic Serb territory that was assigned to Croatia administratively following World War II, but had never been part of Croatia before that. They record walking through, towns and cities that had once been kind of bustling with significant populations, just literal crickets is all they could hear. Like, we're talking like the entire wipeout of a population as a result of this. The documents that we reported on at the Grey Zone, they have been in the public domain for a number of years. Nobody's gone near them. I think the reasons for that are quite clear, because on the one hand, they show that the US, while publicly supporting a negotiated settlement to the war in Croatia, was secretly encouraging their Croat proxies to wage, yes, a brutal war of extermination and total population removal. But more generally as well, they amply underline what's the word, entwined the US was with all of this. To use the modern comparison, we are headed this Friday allegedly for peace talks between Putin and Trump directly in Alaska. Funnily enough, Sarah Palin's invocation of Alaska's proximity to Russia, meaning that she's well placed to be a foreign policy advisor, seems to have paid off, shockingly. Nearly 20 years later, but the real point is that we have heard a lot about the necessity of peace talks in Ukraine and a negotiated settlement. It's not going to happen because the Western powers, who are on the one hand calling for this, are also calling for total Ukrainian victory and zero concessions, which is going to not result in anything. And I, again, for the Grey Zone, but also my personal website, Global Delinquents. It wouldn't be a show with you without a shameless plug, Jamal, for my own work. We see this over and over and over again, where, in the various conflicts in the former Yugoslavia, the US's formal position was always, we support negotiated settlement.
Right.
We are striving for peace in the most difficult of circumstances. But Washington was encouraging its proxies and its clients and its assets to not negotiate at all. So despite the fact that their proxies were outgunned, outmanned, often outmaneuvered, they refused to negotiate because they believed they had endless US financial and military support. So they did not approach negotiations in good faith. They were purely for PR purposes. Except the key difference now is, in August 1995, the Croats had all of the Western weapons and training and a relatively weak enemy force that they could run roughshod over. In Ukraine, they've run out of weapons. The EU is really struggling to rustle up any funds, public or private, to keep this going. And I think that, in a sense, what we're seeing now, it represents the death of a kind of monstrous blueprint that was forged in Croatia and Bosnia and Kosovo and other parts of the former Yugoslavia 30 years ago. This model is now dead.
They still use it. And it's not just Croatia. kill squads, South America. Is there really a difference?
Yeah.
It's like, I need a thick neck guy with no conscience that's willing to kill people. Here's a gun, here's money, here's training. Go out and do our political objectives. And those political objectives dovetail in monstrous ways. And so the character of it may look different, but it's still the same thing. Even in, if you're thinking of terrorists, right? If you're talking about Syria, and it's okay, we need people to overthrow the government. Hey, I have no conscience. I have a thick neck. I have a beard. Give me a weapon. Okay, here's a weapon. Go do it. And they will go and do it. And so regardless of whether it's you using religious fascists, whether you're using ethnic, just neo-Nazis, the blueprint is the same. I agree with you. It's the same blueprint used all over the world. And yeah, the biggest difference here is Russia. Every syllable that comes out of my mouth is a person Russia sends to hell or heaven. They are losing, and they're losing badly. But that's the wild part, right? Like Trump is like, this is going to be humiliating when all of this collapses, and it's about to collapse. And Europe is like, screw you, man. Let's keep this going. It's like, dude, it's about to collapse. Like Trump, look, if Trump believed that he was winning, he will not be negotiating right now. He is negotiating because he knows that this is, that somebody is calling his bet. Europe, and I'll ask that question to you. Why are they so delusional?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to unpick because, I mean, I think there has been this sense for a very long time, like within European corridors of power, if you can even call it that, which is that, well, the US will always come to the rescue. There will always, whatever the rhetoric, whoever's in power, when it comes down to it, the US will ultimately pull our chestnuts out of the fire. And that's very much been Britain's thinking for a century going on now. Is that there's that Winston Churchill quote, which is the Americans can be relied upon to do the right thing after all other options have been exhausted. But this doesn't take into account the fact that the US, it doesn't have the weapons to supply Ukraine anymore. They're not in a position as they were in 2022 and 2023 to build Ukraine an entire new army. Anymore. I have reported for my own website and also for Press TV. There was a report from JINSA, which is this very powerful Zionist lobby organization, which is a driving force behind the training of US police forces by the Israeli occupation forces. Right. It one way or another probably led to the death of George Floyd, amongst other people. They published a report not long ago, which stated that the US spent about 20% of its missile interceptor stockpile during the 12-day war. Right. And it's going to take 8 years to replace what was spent in 12 days. I think that that there is this wider delusion within European power centers. Again, I don't think that that's even an accurate term because they have no power. There's always this sense that, oh well, at the end of the day, the Americans will come to the rescue. These people are still living in this unipolar mindset. We have Kaja Kallas, the insane Baltic hawk who's running EU defense and foreign policy, who says, well, if we can't defeat Russia, how are we going to defeat China? Why are you thinking in these terms in the first place? Let alone, why would you ever think about taking on China? This country that hasn't fired a shot since the 70s, which is
from her, by the way.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
This is Kalis.
Este perrito se parece a la tía. Yo soy Porfirio, el perrito negro.
Agárrala otra vez, agárrala.
Yeah, that's Kalis. She's given.
It's funny because it's true. I think, and it just, but this is the thing, is that genuinely, the EU is led now by these insane hawks. Britain is run by these completely insane hawks, and I think as you and I have discussed before, Jamal, that the British still want to pretend that they're this major global power. They are at the forefront of pushing Ukraine to all of these major escalatory actions, these insane suicide missions like Krinky and Kursk. This was all British planned, and it's just at what stage do you take the L? Like,
Well-
really, yeah.
No, please finish. I'm sorry. Please.
Yeah. No, it's okay. No, I mean, I just think that you know, to circle this round to what we were discussing, you know, initially, is, you know, the breakup of Yugoslavia was it was a classic example of what I think the British and maybe the major European powers like France and Germany always try and replicate, which is, well, we're going to do that. We're going to be like the brains, right? Like, we're going to do the psychological warfare work. We're going to we're going to do the propaganda, and America's going to provide the muscle and the missiles and the weapons. But you know, again, this is 30 years ago. Like, a lot has changed since then. You know, and I mean, this is somewhat tangential, but I think it sums up the kind of state that we're in right now, where I think it was a few weeks back, like the US Army's official Twitter account or X account, whatever, it published a video of a drone dropping a grenade. And the accompanying commentary was, have you ever seen a drone drop a grenade before? And it's like, yeah, like every day for 3.5 years in Donbass, and you're only trying this now. Like, and it's like, yeah, that, like, I just the total lack of learning from you know, what's going on in eastern Ukraine now, where, you know, tanks are irrelevant, artillery is an important factor, but not the most important factor. Drones are dominating the battlefield. Russia has an edge there, which it didn't have at the start of this. You know, and it's like, yeah, that they are stuck in this time warp where they're still, by token of being, you know, US vassals. Oh well, we're still, even if we're deputies, masters of the world. But you know, it's not like that anymore. You know, you have the rise of so many different military powers, not just Russia and China, but, you know, like, I mean, you know, North Korea, Iran, like the, you know, Ansarallah have been using like hypersonic and ballistic missiles, which the West doesn't have. You know, and there has been a total failure to adapt to this new operating environment internationally. You know, they want to cover their ears and just go blah 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 blah, like, and just ignore the reality staring them in the face. And I think that, I mean, if you want to, again, to bring things full circle, if you want to look at the kind of pinnacle of the Western Empire, the US-led Western Empire, global empire, and kind of roughly the point where everything started to unravel, it was in Croatia in 1995. Like, you know, this was an absolutely brutal incursion, which was cheered by the quote-unquote international community. Russia at the time was led by drunken Western puppet Boris Yeltsin. China was poor and also trying to seek a pro-Western path. So they just kind of either cheered this on or turned a blind eye. There was nothing that they could really do about it. You know, we're not there anymore. Like you know, to a large extent, and I might add as well that again, potentially tangentially, the mighty independent journalist Mark Ames, he wrote in late 2008, he wrote a fantastic essay, one of my favorite bits of journalism of all time, for his then website, The Exile. Where he visited the sites of the fighting in Georgia following the very brief Georgia-Russia war, and you know, he found that all of these burnt out American weapons, you know, there were Russian troops feeding themselves heartily on American provided rations for Georgian forces. And he said, and bear in mind, this is a country which was colonized by the US like quite heavily following the 2003 Rose Revolution, which was instigated by the National Endowment for Democracy and the CIA. And he states in this, like, well, I can see that this is the day that America's empire has died, right? Like, we've expanded to such an extent that we can't maintain this any longer. And I think that, ever since then, America has kind of been in the position of Britain in the 1930s, where on paper, they are the world's predominant economic and military power. Right. How that translates to actual war fighting capability, actual force exertion, the ability to make countries do what they want them to do, it's actually rather limited, and it's getting even more limited all the time.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's a limit when you have countries that have nuclear weapons, right? Like the moment that you have, the moment that you're not the sole superpower on the planet, the moment that, for one thing, I thought there were several canary in the coal mines. Afghanistan, where the Taliban takes back the territory, that's a canary in the coal mine. The trade war with China, where you don't have the capability of exerting your will against another country that, 6 years ago you were able to pull off. Okay, that's a canary in the coal mine. Getting crushed in Ukraine is a massive canary in a coal mine. It is humiliating. And yet that humiliation gets worse and worse every day, where war of attrition finally shows the 3 years of wear and tear on the Ukrainian military, where they're dragging in the elderly out of convalescent homes and kids who are, like 18 years old into a military campaign, or press ganging dancers and people mowing their lawn. I mean, the guy was riding his bicycle, the Ukrainian Jeep pulls up, the guy runs off his bike trying to get away from the press gang. I mean, this stuff is outrageous, right? That is not a recipe for success. And when you are the US...
Well, I mean, I think. Sorry to interrupt, my friend, but I think, what probably like one of the most representative videos that I've seen of the conscription splurge in Ukraine is there was like a Deliveroo cyclist, or or whatever it's, like kind of Uber Eats style cyclist, where he's cycling along in Kiev with his like big delivery backpack on. Right. And he gets like tackled. Yeah. He gets tackled off his bike and with his backpack and all, and thrown into a van. And it's like, you couldn't get a more perfect visual manifestation of of Western economic colonization, of the total failure of the proxy war, is that they're now having to haul in people who are, whether willingly or not, working for US corporations for subsistence wages, to die on the front line for BlackRock profits. And it's like, this is it's not really spoken about enough. And I might add as well that this is something I'm working on now. On August 7th, like Gallup, which is a highly respected US polling firm, they published this insane data which showed that about 70% of Ukrainians favor an end to they favor a negotiated end to the war as soon as possible. Only 24% wish to keep fighting. I do wonder who this 24% are. Maybe they just spoke to like Zelensky and his coterie of cokeheads or something. But it's like, you know what I mean? It's like and there was an enormous amount of bitterness towards the US in this poll as well. And it's just like, the only response to calls to end this absolute nightmare shit show emanating from European capitals and mainstream pundits and quote unquote journalists and think tank apparatchiks is just keep going.
Yeah,
because it's been such a success for everyone involved so far.
I think from Europe's point of view, though, they're not Europeans. Like, I mean, I think that's the way they look at it. It's like, yeah, you're Europeans, but you're not us. Like, if I press a button and I have no consequences for what happens when I press that button, okay, do I really care? about the consequences. Like that's more of a moral thing. Okay, but running governments is not a moral issue per se. What they know is we're sending Ukrainians to go and die. If we screw up, then it's not Brits that are dying, it's Ukrainians that are dying. And there is a level of delusion, though, in how long Ukraine can keep this up that they don't seem to acknowledge. Which maybe, maybe it's one of those things of, well, we want them to fight for as long as it takes and fight to the last dead Ukrainian, and we're okay with that. But there are consequences for Europe in this. And one last thing on the Croatia thing. What do they? I was in Croatia. I went to visit, I think this was several years ago. I went to this presentation where they were talking about, I think, Yugoslavia or something like that. It was fascinating because depending upon where you are, you get a different point of view of Yugoslavia and the war and Croatia's role in the war. And the guy was telling me how, they've gotten to the point where, let's say like a woman will go to the bank and the guy at the checkout counter was one of the soldiers that raped her and killed her husband. It would be weird situations like that because of the wars that were taking place. What do they say about it? Like what do they say about it in Serbia? Do you know what they say about it in Croatia now, these days? How did they talk about it?
Well, it's a completely crazy situation because like the wars in this is what's really interesting as well. And it's something that my friends in Serbia, they are very keen. So for instance, like whenever like France and England play like a soccer match, they're very quick to mock it as saying like, these ancient blood feuds, between these two nations. And it's just like, the fact of the matter is that like actually before the Western fomented wars in the former Yugoslavia, ethnic tension didn't exist. Like, it is a lie. Like, so I have been told many very heartbreaking stories actually of by people I know in the region who, so for instance, a Bosnian Croat I know who he was about 16 at the time, where one day he got a knock on the door. And it was like all of the dads in the local neighborhood were going out to have one final drink together because as of like 7 a.m. the next day they were enemy combatants, right?
What did they use for that? Like in Ukraine, they effectively use this kind of Western Nazism that they had stoked into the society, used NATO membership as the crux for that. What did they use there if there were no frustrations prior?
Yeah, well, I think the key thing was that like in the wake of World War II, which was like a battle for survival for Yugoslavia, like particularly Serbs, that like all of the Nazi created puppet structures like the Ustasha in Croatia or the Kosovo Albanian puppet government, they all went into hiding, usually in Western countries, right? They hid out in the Five Eyes spying network. Latin America, of course, like another key exodus point for these people. But then, like when you have independence roll around in the early 90s, suddenly all of these people come back, and in many cases they've been working for the CIA the whole time. While they've been part of the quote unquote diaspora. So I mean, and I also think as well that there was, this is maybe another episode in and of itself, but there was also a strong like economic aspect to this. So in late 1990, the US passed the Foreign Appropriations Act, which explicitly stated that all financial aid to Yugoslavia and trading with Yugoslavia will end unless its constituent republics hold independence referendums in the next 6 months under State Department observation. Now, at this point, Britain, Germany, and the US had been supporting separatist nationalist movements within Yugoslavia for decades, and like training them to carry out terror attacks, etc. So like when this legislation is passed, therefore effectively cutting off Yugoslavia, from international financial markets, you have all of these nationalist movements like waiting in the wings. And again, to bring this back to like Ukraine, for example, in 1957, the CIA produced this extensive 200-page document on, I think it was called resistance factors, and it's all about the potential of staging an invasion of Ukraine in order to break up the Soviet Union. And it divides Ukraine into 12 separate different regions based on the local population's receptibility to Western invasion. And like Crimea and Donbass are ranked 1, which is to say they will completely reject any Western involvement. And then you go to like Lviv and Galicia, like these areas that are like formerly Polish, and with a strong history of Nazi collaboration, and they were judged as like the key areas for supporting an Anglo-American intervention in Ukraine, concerned with like breaking up the Soviet Union. So like, and then you fast forward to Maidan, and like the same areas the CIA tapped as like likely to support US intervention are the areas that support Maidan most strongly, and the areas that were deemed to be not conducive to Western invasion rejected Maidan. Right. So yeah, it is a recurring theme of like sponsoring or even just creating nationalism out of nothing. You got to bear in mind that like at the peak of Ukraine war hysteria in 2022, when there does seem unbelievably to have been a very legitimate belief on the part of Western policymakers that this could be the end of Russia. Congress convened a special hearing on the necessity of sponsoring nationalist breakaway movements in Russia. They wanted to do to Yugoslavia, they wanted to do to Russia what they did to Yugoslavia. And I'll never forget, like, we're going back about 10 years ago now. I was having a chat with a very close Serb friend of mine who warned me then, before all of this stuff kicked off, that they're trying to do to Russia what they did to us, sanctions, international isolation, demonization. This is what destroyed Yugoslavia and demonized the Serbs to this day.
They failed.
Yeah.
And honest to God, man, we need to fail in this. Like, this is fucking outrageous. Like, no, I'm being serious. If you think of, think of all the chaos. Think of all the people that died. And, even if you're just talking about Russia and Ukraine, you're talking about like 120,000 Russians, maybe 1 million Ukrainians. And it's like, okay, well, why did they die? Oh, right, because the U.S. decided it wanted to overthrow the government because it wanted to get after Russia in a geopolitical game of expansion. And it just so happens that it puts me in the mind of Israel, right, where Israel's like, hey, we're hopped up off of killing babies. I bet we can take Iran. And it's like, hey, just to let you know, that's a man. That's not a child. You've been taking out resistance groups. You haven't dealt with a proper country of 80 million people or 90 million people. They're like, yeah, we can do it. Look at all these babies that we killed. And you lose. You get taken apart in a way that is uncommon, in a way that you think. It's like, holy shit, we did not expect this much damage. Well, that's the same thing with Russia, right? We can break Russia up into multiple districts. Kalis, that lunatic, came out and said something like that. And you lose. And it's one of those things where you need to lose, because that pattern of let's use narcos in South America to take down governments that we don't like. How many people are you killing? How many lives are you destroying? Not because they're doing anything wrong. It's because you want global primacy. That shit needs to stop. And the only way that stops is if you fail. And frankly, your empire collapses. So I'm brutal about the stuff because I'm sick of seeing this nonsense being put into action over and over and over again, almost as this pattern. It just, in this case, it didn't work. In Serbia's case, unfortunately, it did. Kit?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a wider point to make here as well, which is like you got to bear in mind that like I actually, and I'm not trying to like stand for Trump or any member of his government here, but like you got to bear in mind that like the US can step back from this very easily, right? And I think I do think that there are for the most part they want out of this because they understand it's a quagmire. Right, like it's like U.S. troops retreating from Lebanon at Reagan's direction because he was like, "Okay, we're fucked. This is terrible. Like, let's get out of it. Let's get out of it."
Right.
Like and I do think that is a very predominant feeling within U.S. politics. Is like, well, why are we so heavily invested in this country that's like thousands of miles away that like has absolutely no bearing on our security or our economic, and in fact is actually like damaging our economic prosperity, keeping this going on, but from say like Britain's perspective, the Anglo-American empire is on the line in Donbass. Like it was as we've discussed before, Jamal, it's the British who have been pushing for this very aggressively on top of elements of the US power structure like Victoria Nuland and John McCain for a very long time. Like they saw this as an attempt. They saw the Maidan coup as an attempt to break up Russia and to use Ukraine as a beachhead for doing this. It's a through line throughout my work. British officials saw this as a grand opportunity to start World War III and finish off Russia forever and prevent Russia from getting in its way in terms of expansion in Central and Eastern Europe and Asia and beyond. And it hasn't worked out. And so that's why they're desperately hanging on to this and willing to encourage Zelensky's intransigence, because they know very well the US could withdraw from this tomorrow and they would be completely screwed.
Kind of agree. I mean, I agree with you that if Trump pulls out, Europe can't carry the ball, but America has a thing for global primacy. And even in this notion of pulling out, it's not that the U.S. wants to pull out. The U.S. wants to freeze it where they can come back to it later. Maybe Putin dies in 10 years. Maybe you have a weaker leader in 10 years. Look at what they did to Syria. They froze the line in Syria. There was the belief that the conflict was over with. And at the most inopportune time, it springs back to life with a bunch of jihadis and animals running through, murdering people, and eventually ethnically cleansing with the fall of Assad. They would prefer something like that with Russia of, hey, let's just freeze it. Let's just, we're going to build up Ukraine. We're going to give them new weapons. We're going to give them new money. We're going to give them all of this stuff. And of course, the Russians at this point says, well, no, that's not happening. We will keep going if that is your policy. Meaning if that's what you're going to do, we'll just keep going. They want to freeze it. They don't want to end it. Meaning from the American point of view, I get what you're saying about the Brits. I'm saying that America has this notion of world primacy. Losing sucks and it's humiliating. What they would prefer is, let's save face. Let's just keep the lines where they are, and we'll come back to this later. I could be wrong. Do you disagree with that, by the way?
Well, I mean, I don't at all. And I think that, I think this is basically what happened in Syria, where it's like, initially there was this US exuberance for getting rid of Assad. And when they realized it was like more difficult, like they kind of, well, we've got the Caesar sanctions, we've got a third of their country, their resource-rich regions under occupation. Yes. Like, what do we care who's in power in Damascus? It was the British chiseling away at Assad's rule in the background from maybe like 2016 to 2023, via the white helmets and all these other intelligence cutouts. Like, they really wanted Assad gone. From the US's perspective, they couldn't care. Like, so yeah, I think that again, a similar
Just interrupt.
dynamic.
Trump kept the oil. Trump protected terrorists in Idlib, al-Jilani, meaning it was the U.S.'s policy to be their air force in those regions in order to suck resources away from the Syrian government. The U.S. had CIA going all the way back to George Bush Jr., Sr., if I'm not mistaken, with Obama spending billions in order to try to overthrow the Assad government using effectively terrorists as a battering ram to do it. We were directly involved in trying to get rid of Assad because from our point of view, we wanted to go after Iran and we needed to get rid of Syria, or at the very least flip Syria, in order to be a platform to do so. I'm not undercutting the notion of the Brits. I'm just saying, what is it? Operation September Sycamore, you get the CIA working it. Meaning we had a direct interest, even going to the point of protecting Jilani for it. The Brits shaved his beard, put him in a suit, washed him down, and say, "Hey, we're going to make this guy presentable." Like, so
they whacked him. They whacked him in the delousing tank,
right?
And now they have. And now they right. now they have an MI6 has an office in Syria's presidential palace. But is that I think that actually sums up perfectly the kind of conflicting approaches that the British and the Americans have. Is that that through brute force, via their control of the international financial system and via their superior force generation power, they occupied Syria, as Trump said. We're there for the oil. We've got the oil. Why would you care? Why would you care who is putatively in power in Syria, in this, in Damascus, in this unrebuildable, ravaged country? You wouldn't. Would you? But I think the British in the background and in the meantime were trying to find a replacement because they'd invested so much in trying to get rid of Assad. And I think it's the same in Ukraine. It's just it's sunk cost fallacy. European powers, particularly Britain, they have basically disarmed themselves trying to equip Ukraine to defeat Russia, and all of this equipment's been destroyed. Even relative normies, this is what I find really interesting, is of course you have the insane braying mob of Ukrainian ultras, although they're ever dwindling, saying oh well, Kiev can still win if I don't know, Ukraine gets given nukes or something. But there are kind of normie elements who work for Western defense think tanks, etc., who are openly admitting, well, this is just over now. We've run out of weapons. We can't create anything like the ammunition, vehicles, munitions, etc., armor, whatever that's been sent on any scale or at any pace. We just have to accept we've lost now. But for ideological purposes, they can't.
Yeah, they don't want to do it. Kit, man, thank you for this. Always appreciate.
Always a pleasure.
I really do. And
always a pleasure, again, never a burden, Jamal.
You do fantastic work. That's why I always bring you on to talk about your articles, because your articles are always really good. Global Delinquents, the Gray Zone UK, the Gray Zone itself. So it's great job on that. Kit Klarenberg, he's an investigative journalist documenting his role in intelligence services and shaping politics and perspectives. Kit, you have a fantastic day, man. Be safe, okay?
God bless you, Jamal. You too, mate. Take care.
Thanks, man. All right. Kit Klarenberg. Definitely check out his articles. Like I said, Gray Zone UK, Global Delinquents, Gray Zone in general. He has the one up about Serbia. So definitely check him out. We have come to the end. We have come to the end. What it says, is Rabbi Shmuley going to be on the show? Hell no. Hell no. Not platforming that asshole. That is the sex rabbi, right? He has sex toys or something like that. Cenk Uygur called him a gorilla and he flipped out. That is the funniest video. You done got me interested in pulling that video up. Cenk Uygur has been fighting with Rabbi Shmuley on shows. I don't know why he puts himself through this. No, that's not true. You put yourself through it because you're fighting for something. But Shmuley is one of the worst people on the planet and one of the most annoying people, on top of just being one of the worst people on the planet. Cenk has debated him on so many times, Piers Morgan and other shows. And Israelis and Jewish supporters, or let's say Zionist supporters, have been doing this permanent victim thing, which is just bizarre. It's like, oh, you said bad things about me and nobody protected me on the show. It's like, dude, you're a corporate lawyer, you're a grown-ass man, or you're a grown-ass woman. You guys are committing a genocide. Shut the F up, right? So Uyghur is in a fight with Shmuley. Uyghur turns around and calls him a gorilla. It's just bizarre. He calls him a gorilla. And Shmuley flips out. He's like, how dare he? And of course, you can't just have a conversation with an individual, right? So I can't talk to you and talk to you as a person and call you an asshole, because it's immediately, he's calling all Jews an asshole. No, I'm calling you a gorilla. You sex rabbi. You disgusting human being. I'm calling you. Do I have that video? It is the funniest thing in the world where he flips up. And it's like, okay, why are we having this conversation? Right? It's like, if this is where this is going to be devolved to every time we talk, why are we having the conversation? Yes, I do have that video. Yes. All right, this is Uyghur having a fight with Shmuley. And listen to how this goes off the rails, like immediately goes off the rails.
Jews and Israelis across the world are now speaking out. What I was trying to say before the baboon interrupted me was that the top Holocaust historian in the country.
You're calling
Here we
Jews
go again.
monkeys and apes? Disgusting.
See, notice he immediately says, "You're calling Jews monkeys and apes?" No, I'm calling you a baboon. You, as an individual person, as a individual unit of consciousness. You are the baboon. That's what he's. But of course, Shmuley and these other Zionists are like, "Oh my God, you're calling all Jews so and so." No, nobody called Jews anything. I didn't even bring up Jews at all. I said, you are a particularly disgusting human being, Rabbi Shmuley. You look like you stink. And the idea that you come on these shows constantly defending baby killers. Yeah, I'm calling you a baboon. I think you fling your shit. I think you eat your shit. I think you are a disgusting human being. Anybody that would get out and defend babies being murdered, well, that baby was dangerous. That baby might have been concealing something in his diaper. How do I know? I'm a victim. Yeah, okay. Let's just not say.
How vile are you?
You
Did
murder
just call a
Muslims
Jew a
for
baboon?
fun. You don't get to talk about racism. You murder Palestinian children for land. You're a disgusting genocidal pig. So you don't get to talk about racism and anti-Semitism. Oh,
just think about that. Like, dissect that for a bit. Like, step out of this just for a moment. That grotesque troglodyte, and I'm saying you as an individual or any other random Zionist that defends that nonsense, knuckle draggers are defending the murder of babies, are starving millions of people, and defend it, and then act as if they're the victim as they defend murdering women, children, babies, and starving all of these human beings to death. Rape videos come out with 60% of the population saying it is fair game to rape another human being, just so happened because we're Jews, they're Palestinians. This is the society we are dealing with. This is not about them being Jews. This is about human beings behaving horribly as human beings with a political ideology of Zionism that says this is okay. With various people like this baboon, I'll go with that. He looks like a baboon, defending it. You are defending the murder of babies. You are defending starvation of human beings. You don't get the bitch and cry victim. You don't. Cenk is right. Let's let her finish.
little
Do
victim.
you call me a
And by the way, I got
baboon?
what, 5 seconds in
Disgusting,
before the
vile.
baboon
You
interrupted.
named
Rabbi,
me.
allow Cenk to answer.
Baboon?
Allow Cenk to answer,
You
please.
call me a baboon? You're just
please go,
you're
Cenk.
just an embarrassment.
Soon he'll be throwing
Embarrassment.
feces onto the screen.
You're an embarrassment.
Okay.
You're just an
Please
embarrassment.
continue,
You call
Cenk.
Jews apes?
Please, Rabbi,
You
and
see
you'll
this?
get your time to
Please.
respond.
Semite.
You'll get your time to respond, Rabbi.
This is unacceptable. You will not call Jews monkeys and apes. You are a disgusting, vile,
Again, notice, I called you a baboon, and all of a sudden, you're calling Jews monkeys and apes. Dude, nobody said Jews. I said you. I said you. You are a baboon. You're an animal. You're a disgusting human being that defends the murder of human beings, women and children, right? Yeah, good job, Cenk. Good job, Cenk. He is one of the most annoying people in these interviews. This filibuster nonsense, I need to fill up the airwaves with nonsense so I don't have to deal with the argument that you're making about me supporting the murder and starvation of babies. Yeah, that is his shtick. He does it on Piers Morgan. He does it on every other show. Cenk calling him a baboon is the funniest thing in the world to me. Somebody in the audience pointed out Anna Kasparian. Same thing with her. She has been a beast. Jesus, she has been a beast on these shows. Bibi now saying Hamas blew up their own buildings. Yeah, I know. And Anastasia, he would have to, right? Again, this is kind of like Russia blew up their own pipeline. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? If you need to defend the murder of women and children, the starvation of millions, the blowing up of all of Gaza at this point, how do you do it? Oh, I know, Hamas did it. Hamas did it. Sure they did. Hung me out. Can you get Mahmoud OD regarding Palestine and Iran? I don't know who Mahmoud OD is. I'll look it up though. Mahmoud OD. Hung me out. I will look him up. I don't know who that person is, but I would look him up. That reminds me. I forget his name, but he's going to be available this week. He's going to be a really good guest on that also. So yes, Mahmoud OD. Where is it? Was way off on Jelani. Well, somebody else. Baboon, LOL. That's why I call any human being that like violence. He's a Jelani fanboy. Oh. Why would I want to platform some rando that thinks Jelani, who I think is an animal, on my show? Why would I bring on terrorists? It's like what he's going to say, no, man, we're doing good work. I would bring on a terrorist if I had somebody in opposition to him, but that's just a fight at that point, right? It's going to end up looking like that. Yeah. Yeah, Laith knows his stuff, man. Laith knows his stuff. Chino is right as a broken clock. Fair enough. Fair enough. Agreed. I'll go with that. Fair enough. He's right as a broken clock. And again, Anna, they have been doing good work on this. They have been stepping into the lion's den like nobody's business on this one. And Anna has been losing it. Like, what they say, never go full retarded. Oh, she has been losing it, but in the best of ways, in the best of ways. So yeah, good on them. So I've tried to get Kevork. Yeah, I've tried to get Kevork. Let's just say he's been difficult to get. I just said that way. I'm not going to be an asshole. He's just been difficult to get. It's his choice. And the neck bolts come up. Yeah, I know, right? She loses it. She loses it. She loses it. All right. All right. I am going to end it. I'm going to say thank all of you. Like this content. Share this content. You can support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, memberships, buy me a coffee. All of those things help support the content. These shows often get demonetized. So your support is the thing that allows the show to be this show. And I appreciate you for doing so. So if you enjoy it, please consider contributing. Otherwise, a like, a share is always good, and it always helps out also. You all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good one all. Be safe.